If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
To anyone who has seen a cryptid, unknown creature, or otherworldly forest being, such as a skunk ape, Sasquatch, Wendigo, crawler, or another strange cryptid, could you describe it for me?
Appalachian crawler. So last night I was camping in Big Meadows in Shenandoah National Park, went to take a shower, and left the dogs in the car and heard barking when I got out. I saw a large white humanoid creature running by the field near the amphitheater, and the dogs were going crazy. The creature was running on all fours, but when it noticed me, it stood upright and then disappeared into a shadow. A few seconds later, I saw a set of what I thought were double headlamps walking about 10 feet above the ground in pitch black, but they weren't casting light, just glowing. As soon as I was able to get reception and search for the things I saw, it said Appalachian crawler matched them. Does anyone else have any encounters in the Big Meadow portion of Shenandoah National Park? Was creeped out and still am even though I came back home today. Another Bigfoot UFO encounter in Pennsylvania. There are quite a few reports of Bigfoot-type creatures and UFOs in the past 2 decades. Location: Mineral Point, Pennsylvania. Date: July 20, 2001. Time: 2330. A man was building a fire behind his house near a wooded area when he heard a noise in the woods and shined his flashlight in that direction. In the distance he saw a large dark animal that was then down on all fours and was assumed to be a bear. The animal then looked at the man and stood upright on 2 legs. It began to move into the woods, keeping a good distance from the witness who was now following it. The man could never hit the creature with his light, he could only see a silhouette of its body, which gave the impression of being about 8 to 9 feet tall, furry, and blackish brown in color. It appeared to be moving on 2 legs, and they kept quite a distance apart while moving at a relatively slow pace. During the time that the man followed the creature, it appeared to be moving in an upright position until he lost sight of it in the thicker woods. After losing sight of the creature, the witness backtracked and, looking upward, was startled to see something quite strange in the sky. About 500 feet away, he saw a large solid luminous triangular object with no individual lights. He estimated the object to be the size of a 2-story house. It appeared to be longer than wide. The object, which was silent, was first observed at approximately 50 feet above the ground in a clearing. It then moved down slowly to about 20 feet, where it disappeared behind a thick part of the woods and was no longer seen. When I was young, I have the distinct memory of seeing a werewolf. I was faking sleeping in the back of my family's car. I remember my dad actually swerving to miss it. It felt surreal, like a fever dream. Actually wrote a poem about it. Rowan's the country crickets sing a song. While all the while we drift along on back roads dark, we cut with headlamps. Strips of white along a black map of scrub brush and gravel. Roadkill and single shoes all by their lonesome. We travel always onward, making our way to new trails. Not yet defiled with our toxic personalities making themselves manifest in hoarding garbage and clutter build on each other. My panic slowly grows, it chokes in a stutter. We hate one another not so silently. He looks at me from the driver's seat. Brow furrowed, eyes red from beer drunk not so long ago. My green eyes close tight. My breathing is neat and ordered. I feign sleep until he pays attention to his driving. Oh my God. She gasps from the passenger's seat that's broken and reeks of oil and gas. I hate the past. My stomach turns cold in a flash. And I feel like I am falling. What is that? She hisses. Flat packing question like a punch against my young nose. My blood drops to my toes, and I look now. Eyes just wide enough to take the sight in. There on the side I see a patched, mangy hide. Teeth like a jar that's broken inside, cracked and waiting for a wayward hand. Walking on legs like a man, and for a second, I swear it's at my throat. My father sways hard to the side, and I'm floating. He curses with a rough-sounding bark that hurts my ears. It gives weight to my fears. Jesus, Jesus, please save me, I don't think I'm dreaming. Gray skin, yellow eyes. I'm a pretty avid hiker and have never encountered anything like this creature before. I've seen plenty of bears, birds, snakes, etc., but this was different. I was visiting a Florida state park called Huntoon Island State Park, and you have to take a ferry over to it. There's a walking trail called the Wet Trail that runs along the river. If you're considering a visit, be aware that we encountered 17 rattlesnakes about a mile in, so be prepared if you're not fond of snakes. At the end of the trail, they have a Native American shell mound. My buddy and I got to the top of this roughly 30 feet mound and were looking out over the river when I turned around and saw a face staring at me from behind a log. The warnings were human, not fully detailed. The lips and skin were gray, and it had these yellow eyes. Not glowing, just yellow. It appeared to be hiding and watching us, and then it suddenly vanished in the blink of an eye. It scared the absolute dog shit out of me, and I've been searching around the internet looking for similar encounters. Before I even saw it, my buddy said he felt like something in the woods was watching us. It was probably one of the most horrifying moments of my life. The way it looked at us felt like we were prey. What was it? Let me start by saying I probably brought that on myself, but whatever the case, I'm still thinking about it. This was roughly 3 years ago when I was with my now ex-girlfriend. I live in the northeastern US and have been a believer in Bigfoot ever since I saw Leigh Stroud's accounts in his miniseries. I live in an area with wildlife preserve territory everywhere and loads of nature trails. One night after drinking with my girlfriend, I suggested going on the trails, wood knocking and all that. I have a trucker's tire bat that I bought specifically for knocking, and I brought it with me. We get on the trail north of my house down the road, and I start doing pairs of knocks, one, then 4 or 5 seconds later, another. Nothing. Not really surprised, as I wasn't expecting anything. We were about 20 minutes into the trail, and I decided to do a whoop. 5 to 10 seconds later, we got a response. Close. My girlfriend and I look at each other like, what the hell? For roughly 40 minutes we were lost on the trails looking for the exit while this thing was just out of sight of the flashlight, growling and calling out. When we got home, I looked it up, and the call was a spot-on match for a Fisher cat. We laughed it off. A while back I shared the story on a Bigfoot community for laughs, and they pointed out that Bigfoot is known for mimicry, and Fisher cats don't stalk humans. Was it a Fisher cat? It was 2006 in Vermont. My girlfriend and I were driving home from a Boston concert, Interpol at the Orpheum. She was driving and I was asleep with my head leaning against the window. I awoke at the precise moment to see a creature crouched on the side of the highway. I was a fraction of a second, but I remember the stature as if it were yesterday. It was human-shaped and sized. My girlfriend saw it too and said it looked like a golem-like creature. She is a skeptic when it comes to almost everything, but she saw it. It was around 3 a.m. on the interstate. 1991 sighting. The following incident took place while stationed at Lowry AFB in Denver, Colorado, in July 1991. Around 3 a.m. on a Saturday night, my roommate Sean P. and I were bored and had been aimlessly walking around the base since midnight. As we were headed back, nearing our dormitory, we saw a man-sized winged creature land and perch itself atop the center of a long, 2-story building, one of 3 training buildings where we had attended training. Only a dark silhouette was visible, but the best way to describe it was as like a gargoyle. The strangest part was that we were affected identically and simultaneously. We didn't speak a word to each other, we never stopped walking towards it and never lost a step, both in a trance-like state of fear and awe. As we reached the center of the building, we had to turn and walk backwards to keep it in sight. This is when I tripped over a trash can, but this broke the trance state we were in. When I looked back up, the creature was gone. We didn't say anything but briefly looked at each other and sprinted across the street to our dormitory. Once we got inside our room, we had our window open, we immediately closed it, sat down and just stared at each other in complete shock, wondering what the hell we just encountered. We never spoke of it again. Possible dogman? Hey guys, I wanted to ask if anyone has seen or heard of any possible dogman encounters near Bradley, California, or King City, California. My family moved into that area recently, and they have been experiencing some strange activity around their property. They have goats and hens and are worried recently, whatever has been prowling around might get to them. They have a German Shepherd dog that guards the property at night, but recently it got into a physical altercation with something they believe was large enough to possibly have picked him up and thrown him, or something similar, because the dog is injured in his back. A trip to the vet confirmed the injury, and they are helping him get better. They have also had at least 4 sightings in about a fortnight of a creature that looks like a big dog or wolf that can walk on 2 legs as well as on all 4s. The closest dogman sighting that I've heard of was similar, the Santa Cruz Mountains. Would you all recommend getting another large dog to help patrol the area at night? If so, what breed would you recommend? If anyone has any suggestions on how one can deter this possible dogman from the property, please let me know. I've been seeing paranormal things for years. The incident happened 2 years ago in a rural village, and I still can't explain it. I've been experiencing paranormal events for a few years now. I want to share one specific incident that happened about 2 years ago. I was staying at a countryside house. One night, around 1 a.m., I needed to use the restroom. Since the outdoor latrine was quite a walk across the yard, I decided to just step out and do my business right off the porch. I didn't bring a flashlight or a phone/camera with me. Right in the middle of it, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. Something was sitting on a barrel just 3 meters, about 10 feet, away from me. When I looked up, pure terror hit me, and I broke out into a cold sweat. There was a hairy creature sitting there, dangling its legs. I felt like it was staring straight into my soul, but I just froze, staring back at it. It had human-like proportions and was about 120 centimeters, 4 feet, tall, but its arms were bizarrely short, looking as if they only went down to where the elbows should be. Its body was covered in black fur, the center of its face was white, and its eyes were elongated and completely white. I carefully backed into the house, never breaking eye contact with the creature. A heavy thunderstorm started right after, and it poured rain until morning. When daylight came, there were clear marks on the barrel showing that someone or something had indeed been sitting there. I still have no idea what it could have been. Has anyone ever encountered anything similar? Sighting/encounter? I stayed at my coworker's property at a ranch in Walnut Grove, California, after a barbecue a couple of weeks ago. I decided to sleep in my truck in the driver's seat. Between 3 o'clock and 5 a.m., I awoke and could have sworn I observed a short, gray-looking alien standing beside the driver's side door. It was shorter than my side mirror. I remember closing my eyes and opening them again, and it was gone. I can't be sure it was anything, but yesterday my friend told me that around 2 to 3 a.m. he woke up because he heard something walking on top of his fifth-wheel trailer, which he rents on the property. He also said whatever it was opened his screen door and tried to open the door to the trailer, which was, luckily, locked. The next morning, he looked for footprints and only found his own, leaving him unsure of what had happened. I told him what I saw the night I stayed for the barbecue. He didn't make fun of me and definitely looked concerned since he stays on the property still. Does anyone know or have any sightings in the San Joaquin Delta? I need advice. Hi, I'm from India, and for the past 2 years, I've lived in my village. After some months I started to see some dark, human-like creatures roaming around. They're like humans but taller. Then strange things started happening frequently. I have seen some dark, monkey-like creatures in the hills near our house. It's way big, around 20 to 30 feet. Then, 7 days ago, some strange noises came from the hill for 2 days. After a few days, some people from another state came to our village and went up to the hill to start some kind of ritual and place a light there. When I asked some people of the village, they said they had some kind of dream, so they came here. I don't know what it means. Werewolf encounter. This coming August will be 3 years since I, my cousin, and some friends witnessed something pretty scary and, to this day, unexplained. We still think and talk about the experience frequently because of how eerie it was, so sharing here might provide some answers or at least offer a space to share it with the world. Every summer my family, cousins, and a few family friends travel to a rural place in County Kerry right beside the coast. Without giving away our house's exact location, it's surrounded by forested mountains and cliffs in a bay area. The village where we stay is quite rural and has only 2 pubs, 1 petrol station, a church, and a beach cafe, which are essentially the only amenities available. Farming and fishing are both massive in the area, so there are plenty of those people. Farmers in the area usually have mountain sheep or goats, the only breeds that can survive the weather and steep hills. My cousin's house is located far up the road in a dense, shrubby area of the mountain, and their neighbors own a large farm adjacent to their home. The neighbor's shed is about 50 feet up the road from my cousin's house, and another smaller tractor shed is approximately 50 feet from that, with field space in between. Behind the tractor shed is a dense forest. There are also a few derelict houses that have been abandoned for a while near them. My cousins host an end-of-summer barbecue with all our friends and family, and it is typically a very enjoyable occasion. My cousins had their barbecue early in August 3 years ago because the weather was better then. That night, my cousin, my sister, our friend, and I went for a walk along a steep dirt road used by farmers to access the mountains. This road is beside my cousin's house, and we usually walk up a bit to get a good view of the bay on clear days. However, this time it was quite dark, probably around nautical twilight, so we had just enough visibility before it became completely dark. It's worth noting that this was on the 6th of August, 2023, and just a few days before we had both a blue and a supermoon. While we were walking along the path, we looked to our right. We had a view of the neighbor's 2 sheds, and we could see a completely black figure crawling along the ground on all 4s unnaturally fast. It stood midway through, moving on its 2 hind legs and bolted as fast as possible into the forest area behind the tractor shed. We immediately ran down as fast as we could down the hill road and back to my cousin's house, where I left my sister back with our friend who was older, as my sister was pretty young at the time, while my cousin and I walked cautiously back to the area where we had spotted the creature. At this time it was nearly completely dark, so we knew we couldn't stay for long, but as we waited and stared into the spot where it was originally, we noticed two yellow slitted dog-like eyes staring directly at us. We ran down and haven't been back since. The sighting has been something we have discussed a lot the last year or two since it happened, because there was no way what we saw was human, yet it wasn't quite animal either. We have been calling it the Wolfman, and I'd love others' input. Mine was about 18 years ago. My wife and I were spending a weekend at the camping site where we had a permanent 200 square meters slot for our caravan in Osnabrück, Germany. On the Saturday evening we were at an on-site party, and at about 2 o'clock we decided to head back to our caravan. The weather was fine, so we were at a casual walking pace. Suddenly, something bulky silently brushed between us. We looked at this thing, and at first I thought it was a wolfhound, as it was white, high, and on all fours. It had dark fur like a dog. But when I looked closer, I saw that the two front muscular legs only touched the ground lightly and not consistently, like the back two legs in clawing, as if a human were to impersonate a dog, for example. Its head was large, and the jaw was opening and shutting as if it were trying to speak. Although from the side, the head partially had a canine outline, it was hardly furry and more like human skin. Thinking back, I think it either had escaped from a lab or was a dogman. As my brain could not register it as a known animal, I snapped, and wanting to protect my wife, my instinct was to be loud, so I shouted at it, "What are you, for Christ's sake? You're not fooling us, you're not a dog. Now clear off." At that moment, it was about to stand up, and if it had done so, it would have been over 2 meters tall. But as it hurt other people, it got back down, but not completely, like if a human bent over to impersonate a dog but did not get down on knees in a crawling position. It then scattered off into the forest. It did not bark, growl, or pant, and was clearly not in the place it wanted to be. This incident occurred approximately 6 years ago. I was about 25 at the time. I was walking my roommate's dog. We lived in a small, secluded suburban area right on the edge of town, right before the desert. I would usually walk the dog around 1 or 2 in the morning because I work overnights at a local 7-Eleven. One time when I was walking the dog, Tank had just stopped, lowered his head and started growling towards the desert area just off the road. Now there wasn't much light, as we were on the edge of town, and it was just expansive desert in that direction. By the time my eyes had adjusted, I could see this coyote, but it wasn't a coyote, there was something off. It was unusually large for a coyote, particularly one found in the desert, and its face was not as pointed as expected. Instead, it appeared flat. That's when everything clicked into place. Now, I had heard the stories since I was a young kid. I never thought any of them were true until that very moment. I realized how much danger I was in. I drew my knife, a big Bowie knife, and pointed it at the creature and yelled, "Leave us be, beast. I know what you are." This coyote looked me dead in the eyes, stood up on its hind legs, turned around and ran off into the desert. For a few months after that, during my shifts at 7-Eleven, there would be a few coyotes just sitting outside across the street, staring into the building, and every time I'd walk home, I could hear things following me in the dark at a distance. On nights when I was home alone, I could hear tapping on my windows and scratching at the door. These are signs that you're being pursued by a skinwalker. My paranoia eventually grew to the point where I had to move into a city on the east coast of the US. They haven't bothered me here yet, and I hope they never find me again. Camping with a friend. It's late at night, we're sitting around the campfire smoking cigars and shooting the shit. We suddenly hear some branches cracking behind us. Not super worried, bears and mountain lions are common in these parts. So we build up our fire and stand facing the noise. Then we heard some rustling in the bushes behind us. First, we heard noise to our left, then in front of us, and finally to our right. Whatever it was circling us, and it wasn't too concerned with being quiet at this point. We start to panic a little. Too fast for a bear, but it sounded too big for a mountain lion. So my friend bangs a stick on our pan, and I bang my hunting knife and machete together, and we both roar into the wild in an attempt to scare whatever this is away. A pair of big eyes appear in front of us. It was too dark to see what this thing was exactly, but we could see the light from the fire reflecting in its eyes. At this point, our roars turn into screams because we are terrified, and then the eyes rise very high, allowing us to partially see a dark, blob-like shape of a massive figure, which then bolts off into the woods faster than anything I've ever seen. It made all sorts of noises as it left. Hands down the scariest thing I've ever gone through. I won't even pretend to know what we saw. We didn't sleep that night. We probably should have just got in the car and left. But we stuck it out. Scary stuff though. My first encounter. My encounter happened in the late summer of 1981 outside of La Pine, Oregon. My mom had passed away in January of that year, and my dad felt like we needed some bonding time with a little escape from town for a few days. He had a 68 VW Westfalia that he'd been working on getting camping ready, and he was excited to use it. The campsite was on a property belonging to a friend of my dad's named Jerry and was northeast of La Pine by 20 miles or so. I've looked at maps since then and have no idea where it was. It was a long time ago, and I was a 13-year-old dumb kid who wasn't paying attention. We left Portland on a Monday, close to noon, and got to the campsite about 4 hours or so later, around 4 o'clock to 4:30. The campsite was quite a ways down a fairly rough gravel road that turned to dirt 2-track after the first 5 to 6 miles. My dad remarked that he didn't think anyone had been there in quite a while, based on his friend Jerry's statements and the amount of overgrowth on and around the road. We got to the site and set up camp, which was in a small clearing at the end of the road. Camp was simply parking the van, pulling out the awning, old school with poles and ropes, unloading the cooler, making a fire pit, and setting up chairs. As a typical 13-year-old, I wouldn't even consider sleeping in the van with my dad, so I pitched a small tent near the passenger rear of the van and tossed in my stuff for the night. After setting up camp, we hiked around a little and checked out the area. There was a small creek that was getting close to dried up, and while it wasn't heavily forested, it had the typical eastern Oregon high desert type of scrub vegetation with a few stands of small trees. My dad was a retired Multnomah County sheriff turned full-time musician, and he liked his cocktails, so by the time we'd finished dinner and were sitting around the fire, it was probably 8:30 to 9 o'clock or so, and he was on martini number 4, possibly 5. We heard coyotes yipping in the distance, and Dad thought he'd get them going with a few calls of his own. He did a couple stereotypical coyote calls, and they replied. He made several more calls, they responded initially but then fell silent. Everything got silent, except my dad. He called again, and the reply this time was most definitely not a coyote. It was a roar scream shriek from the southeast that must have easily lasted 10 to 15 seconds. Dad looked at me and literally said, "What the duck was that?" I was shocked but young and curious. The coyote howled again, and we heard another scream, this time a little closer and a little more to the east of us. At this point Dad retrieved his pistol, loaded it up, and suggested we think about turning in for the night. That's when we heard the third scream of the night. It was very close, probably within 50 to 75 feet, and we felt it as much as heard it. It was from the opposite direction, more north/northeast than the first two screams, and it was very loud. Dad lost his shit, threw the cooler in the van, and ripped the awning loose, and we got out of there as fast as that poor little VW would carry us, leaving everything else behind. We were dead silent until we stopped for fuel in Oak Ridge. Chatter after that was sparse and strained at best. Once home, we talked a little about it and agreed we had no idea what it was and that keeping our mouths shut was probably a good idea. Since that time, I've grown up and had a short career in music, doing production sound in both hard rock and country western. I have a good idea of how decibels work and what it takes to produce that level of sound pressure. Looking back, I'm scared of what could have sounded like that and how close it was. Pale crawler encounter. So yesterday morning, around 4 o'clock to 4:30 a.m., I encountered a crawler up close. I'm a night owl, and I enjoy caffeinated drinks as well as snacks, so like most people who get a craving, I set out to the local Tom Thumb on foot. I live in a trailer park not far from it, so it wasn't really an issue to walk in the dark since my eyesight adjusts really well. There are only a few streetlights. Everything is nice about the walk, and it was a comfortable night. I end up getting my snacks and drinks and head home. I get to a point where there's little to no light. There's a forested area that is small between the park and the town itself. All of a sudden, I hear something emerging from the brush, and it's sluggishly moving on the ground. As my eyes adjust to the darkness and I hear the creature approach, I quickly pull out my box cutter, since unsavory types are often in the area, flip it open to fully extend the blade, and warn whatever is coming that it should stay away, just in case something foolish tries to attack. I didn't make direct eye contact, but I noticed it was pale, on all fours and trying to be stealthy. I think by talking to it, it had become either confused, intimidated or simply curious about the fact I didn't show fear or worry in its presence. I simply kept my blade out and walked calmly into the light and was ready for anything that would happen. It didn't follow. I didn't care to look behind me, as I knew if it was still around, it would be back in the brush again. At first I had a feeling of instinct that screamed it was a threat, but after it froze and I had my blade ready, that feeling of it being a threat left me completely. These creatures seem to understand our speech and when a fight isn't worth it. I walk that road often, and there are always people driving down it. So it's strange that they would be so close to each other, but I often encounter these situations. The entire town is surrounded by forest. I did some research on these animals. They prefer areas like this but typically avoid locations that are in close opposition to their natural habitats, only approaching towns when food sources are scarce. Thing thought I was on the menu at first, it seems. I'm not someone who usually writes about my encounters. I have seen some shit in life. Things that would make any man piss himself. However, since this sighting is so close to town and has never been documented in this area of the US, I felt it was important to make a report to all of you. Document it. Maybe my encounter and the details could help one day. It's ironic. The one night my phone is at 3% and I choose to charge it at home is the one night something happens. I've lived here for nearly a decade. Walk to most places no matter the time if I need something. The presence of this crawler is a recent development. As far as I can tell, this is the case. I had to walk at night last week, and it wasn't there, so, it arrived in the area within the last 7 days. This is not for entertainment purposes, again, this is for documentation. To answer one question that I'm sure I'll be asked, wasn't I scared? No. I have reasons for this. Mostly what has happened in life. I was ready to stand on business, however, if it came to that. I think the reason I was so relaxed after the initial excitement was because I knew it was not interested in attacking me once I stood my ground and challenged it. It stopped following me and froze in place once I did. I was ready to turn and jam my knife into it as many times as I would need to. I don't know if it was scared, curious or just sizing me up after understanding I would fight back. Whatever the case, it didn't follow me home, so I've been at peace ever since. Besides, I have multiple animals to warn me if something is wrong and family members too that are perceptive. If anything did, I would have known. I'll go again in the daylight to see if there's any evidence of it. I won't be a moron and go back at this hour. Just in case. I was like 6 or 7, it was already dark outside, and I was walking in the forest around the little town my father grew up in Mexico, with my mom. She had a small lamp in her hand, and that was all the light we had. Then we heard sounds like steps in the dry leaves on the floor. My mom instinctively shone her flashlight on it, and we saw the side of a weird monkey-like animal sitting on the floor, the size of our cocker spaniel but dark brown or gray. My child self thought it was a lemur like Zabumafu, although, of course, those animals don't exist in the wild in our country, especially for its big, round, bright yellow eyes that were staring at us. But I couldn't see more details because my mom took my hand and we ran towards the town like there was no tomorrow. She called it a chupacabra. My dad says it has to be a monkey, even when monkeys aren't common in that area. I have no idea what the hell we saw, but it surely scared us. I saw a strange creature when I was a kid in Bavaria. It all happened in August 2016. I was 15 and my brother was 14. We grew up in rural Bavaria in Germany, and our father had been excited for days because the planet Mars was supposed to be clearly visible in the night sky. And so it was. We admired Mars shortly after sunset. Our house stood at the edge of a forest, and I wanted to be cool, so I went with my brother to walk through the woods at night, about half a kilometer from the house. We did that, and on the way back we came out of the woods again and only had to walk up a steep hill to get back onto our parents' property. There, in the darkness, a muscular, naked man came towards us. At first I thought he was naked because he had the same color and texture everywhere, no contrast like clothing. He walked past us quickly, but he wasn't running. He seemed gigantic to me, probably around 2 meters tall. I swear, he looked like he was wrapped in gray-white, light gray cloths, like cleaning rags. And when I said hello, because I didn't know what else to do, I finally realized what was wrong with his face. He didn't really have a face, instead, it was tightly wrapped in those cloths. And his head was enormous and not human, but like a mix between a pony's and a German shepherd's, this grotesque, elongated shape. He didn't do anything at all, just kept walking. He seemed extremely old to me. I couldn't say another word, and my brother asked me, once we were back at the house, if I had seen that too. A few years later, now in our mid-20s, I asked him about it again. He confirmed the story once more. To this day I don't know what that was. If someone had wanted to play a prank on us, they would have had the perfect chance to chase us across the entire meadow. Strangely, we were both shaken at the time, but we weren't actually afraid of him. He radiated authority and something ancient, as if he had existed long before humanity. Like a nature god? There are several legends about mythical creatures in our area, but nothing that even remotely fits this. What I saw rise out of the grass still haunts me. This all started in 2019. I'm not sure what month it was, but I lived in Indianapolis and was in 6th grade at the time. One night, it was probably around 9 p.m., maybe a little earlier or later. For some reason, I decided to go for a walk. That was pretty normal for me, I did it all the time. I wasn't even scared because I never had a fear of the dark. I had no reason to be. I hadn't been walking for very long. I got onto my road, walked a little way down it, and turned onto another road that led to another road with also a set of houses. While I was walking, I noticed some grass moving. The grass wasn't super overgrown, maybe just a few inches taller than a well-mowed lawn, but nothing crazy. Because it was dark, I thought it was probably a rabbit or a bunny moving around in the grass. I looked closer because I wanted to get a better look at it. Then, out of nowhere, something stood up. It looked like it rose straight out of the ground. It was extremely tall and completely dark, almost pitch black. The only detail I could make out was what looked like a hat on its head. That's all I saw before I took off running down the road as fast as I could. I never looked back once. To this day, I still don't know what I saw. I've heard a few theories and seen a few things people think it could have been, but back then I wasn't into creepy stories or paranormal stuff. I might have watched a few top 15 scary videos here and there, but that was about it. I honestly don't know what I saw that night, but I know I saw something. I work in road construction, and we're doing part of the interstate, and I will say it's in the southern part of the United States. One night we were getting ready to move the equipment onto the road, and I was tasked with slowing the traffic down enough until our equipment was in the work zone. We shut one side of the road off to traffic and make them use one lane until our work zone ends. I was about a mile before the work zone, starting to get ready to slow the traffic down when I was outside the work truck, smoking. I kept hearing footsteps in the woods and down into the median between the roadways. I didn't think much of it because I'm in the south, where we have various critters. I'm just casually smoking my cigarette, not paying attention to anything until I hear a very loud huff. This sound was similar to a dog's huff, but it was about 20 times louder than that of a large dog. There was another person in my work truck with me who also heard it, and he's looking out the window and asking if I heard it. I put out my cigarette and climbed back into the cab and turned on the work lights. Couldn't see into the woods, but I did see the massive shine of two yellow eyes about 8 feet off the ground. We sat and watched the creatures move around in the woods near the median, but they never came close enough for us to see their silhouette. I got the call to close down the lane, and I took off. After work that night I helped take down the lane closure barrels, and the ones closest to the spot it happened it smelled like piss and were completely soaked in urine. Like someone poured buckets of it onto those barrels. I never went to work unarmed anymore. Gargoyle or dog-like entity? Little backstory, my brother is a bit of a free spirit type, and he and his wife decided to move to the countryside and start a small farm. The house is a grand Victorian-era farmhouse, pretty typical for the middle of nowhere in the Midwest. He has 2 kids, his son is 5, and his daughter is 1. I'm not sure if this is related, but very soon after moving in, my nephew started having seizures where he'd go catatonic and foam at the mouth. Obviously it was scarier and harder to get to a doctor when you're in a town of like 85 people and 45 minutes away from the nearest big town. He's now on medicine and hasn't had one. My mom went to stay with my brother after my nephew's second seizure/hospital visit. Her profession as a nurse made it a logical choice. She mentioned that around 5 a.m., she entered the pantry to begin preparing coffee due to her inability to sleep, and in the corner of the kitchen, she observed a white dog resembling a pit bull, although its head was more akin to that of a gremlin. She said she stepped toward it, and it walked into the cabinet and disappeared. After this there have been other sightings that people are very quick to dismiss. My nephew talked about how sometimes he sees a white dog upstairs by the bedrooms and asked his mom how it gets in the house. Then, my brother reported that a white entity resembling a somewhat unsettling gargoyle entered his barn while he was inspecting the chickens at night, prompting him to spend an hour researching various animals in the vicinity. My brother's friend was spending the night after drinking a little too much and also mentioned a big white dog. What do dogs/gargoyles mean? Has anyone had experience with this? My brother is incredibly skeptical of anything spiritual, God/ghosts/meditation even, but I'd like opinions on what could be happening. Anytime someone spends the night there, they wake up feverish. My brother got an air purifier for the whole house because of it. I really think something is weird there, but the worst part is it doesn't feel scary. I am calm there. Possible dogman encounter. So this took place back in 2023. I was visiting my family in Wisconsin. They live in a heavily wooded area. It was winter and there was snow on the ground. I was sleeping in my cousin's room on the floor. Everyone else was asleep except for my little cousin and I. We were playing Crash Bandicoot on the Switch. Anyways, it was about 2 a.m., I think, and we noticed a light had turned on outside. Their porch light had a motion sensor, so we were obviously like, whoa, what was that? We figured it was an animal of some kind, so we ignored it. But then it happened again. We weren't really scared because they had a raccoon who sometimes got into their cat food box, so we assumed it was just that. We turned off our game because we had to get up early anyways, but when we looked out the window, the light was still on. This meant something was still there. We walked to the window and didn't see anything at first, but then my cousin hit me with his elbow and said, "Holy shit." I looked further out, and there was this animal-looking thing that was tall, and it had eyes that were really reflective. It almost looked like they were actually glowing orange. It looked like it could see us, like it was staring at us. This creature was tall, nearly the size of a person, and possibly even larger. We assumed it was a coyote, but it was way bigger than that and didn't look like any coyote we had seen. The light shut off because it had been walking away long enough, so we put a towel over the window. They don't have curtains in that room, and we were a little uneasy, and went to bed. In the morning we had brought it up to his parents, my aunt and uncle, and they said they had noticed the light but assumed it was either us or, like we thought, a raccoon or something. We told them what we saw, and they said it was probably a coyote. When we went outside, we saw these huge footprints in the snow, although it had been melting all night and morning, so they weren't super clear. My aunt and uncle weren't sure what the footprints were, but they didn't seem scared of them. Just thought they were weird. Anyways, I came across this channel and wanted to see what you guys thought. Meeting a weird humanoid creature. This story is true, but it's up to you whether you believe it or not. It happened this summer in Russia. In the evening, I got a voice massage from my boyfriend. From the very beginning it was clear that something horrible had happened, as he couldn't speak clearly and his voice sounded stressed out. He said when he was on his way home after work, he came across something weird. He was driving alone without any other vehicle nearby. It was getting dark. The road wound up along the forest, and on another turn, he saw some sort of white and gray head peeking out from the trees. He decided that it was just a plastic bag, but suddenly he saw, in the rearview mirror, some sort of humanoid creature running after the car. It wasn't very skinny, with very long arms and no hands and about 180 to 190 centimeters tall. It was running on all fours and approached the car very quickly. Its elbows bent in both directions, which allowed it to move very fast. My boyfriend could hear its clattering as if a horse were chasing the vehicle. Though the speed was approximately 65 to 70 kilometers per hour, it was still close. There were not any facial features, or at least it was hard to see them. The creature was left behind only after a turn and returned to the forest. We decided it couldn't be a horse or any other animal, as it was too close to see it rather clearly. Moreover, the speed was too high for any animal to run that fast. Unknown humanoid creature. Hello, this is a very skeptical topic for me to discuss. This was 100% real, and to this day I can see this scene play through my head play by play. I'm currently 26, and this sighting of mine happened when I was 21 years old in Longview, Texas. I've never in my life experienced anything like this before. I've always heard, seen documentaries, and read accounts of people seeing aliens/humanoids/demons, etc. Never did I once think I would encounter one in my life. My friend and I were living at my parents' house at the time. I have a small-scale landscaping company that we were running at the time. One day, my dad and I got into a verbal argument, which led to my friend and me getting into a verbal argument, which led to me and my friend leaving for Longview, Texas, to stay with his parents. We left around 7:30 p.m. and arrived around 10:30 p.m. It was completely dark, but the moon was out and bright. We tried to enter the front door of his mom's house, but it was locked. We ended up going to the back door. My friend was walking in front of me, and I was following behind. We were walking on the right side of his house, walking towards the back. His backyard had a shed at the very back of the property, which backs up to a tall pine forest. As we were walking, I noticed that when people walk without paying attention, they often tend to look at the ground. That's what we were both doing as we walked to the back door. Well, something in me felt like looking up at the back of the property. The moment I looked up, maybe 30 to 35 yards away, a tall, slender, gray/white humanoid-shaped figure walked out from behind the shed at the back of the property. I instantly froze and first thought it was a person, but then I realized it wasn't. It felt similar to experiencing sleep paralysis, where you cannot speak. I saw this 9 to 10 feet figure walk from behind that shed and stride onto the dirt road leading into the woods. I was trying to scream or yell something out, but I wasn't able to. I was so frightened. My friend just kept walking with his head down and didn't realize what was happening. As soon as the figure entered the woods, I screamed, "Hey!" My friend turned around and asked what I was yelling at. I said, "You didn't just see that?" He was like, "No, dude, you're tripping. I can tell you that I was, in fact, not tripping, and this figure I watched walked for a solid 3 to 4 seconds before it disappeared into the woods. Most bizarre experience of my entire life. I've never been scared of walking around the woods at night or anything, really, until that day. Need help identifying a cryptid? So this has been sitting with me for years. I just kind of figured it was one thing and then the other, but I'm here now, so that's all that matters, right? Well, anyways. I was driving around right after work, Michigan DNR, at the time, and I found myself in the Skinwalker area and eventually a pleasant trail that looked unprofessional. I decided to walk it to relieve myself from some of the stress of the day, and all was good for around a mile. Then I heard whistling. The whistling goes on for some time before stopping, then picking back up again, your typical cryptid fun stuff. But, upon taking my earbuds out, I found it hard to even hear it follow me, but I felt I was being followed, watched. No twigs cracking, no leaves crunching, it was just whistling. I should note I am a cryptid fanatic, so I'm aware of mimicry and taunting and all that jazz, but it's what happened next that still sticks with me. The whistling goes on for some time, and I adjust my pace to get the hell, Michigan, out of there, but I notice my phone just shut off randomly. Strange, but whatever. I turn it back on, and a few moments later, it forces itself to shut down once more from its previous 70-something%. This happened once or twice more before I gave up and went full speed for the half mile or so I had left. Eventually I get out of there, and I turn my phone back on out of instinct, and it works just fine the rest of the way home. The battery health and all the internal components are functioning as they should. I always thought it could be the cheap crap phone or some sort of intervention, and it still may be, but if it wasn't, I haven't heard of too many Michigan-centric cryptids that mess with electricity/technology like that. It just seems too specific for this phenomenon to be related to the area. Any clue what I may have run into? What did we see? For context, the event was years ago, so the details of said cryptid are hazy. My 3 friends and I would usually go to an abandoned furniture store on the outskirts of our neighborhood to engage in typical teenage activities. Day was like any other normal day. We went in through the back, where we had popped a garage door open, because the store's main entrance was on a main street in the city. We used our phones as flashlights because the back of this place is huge. We know this place. I have been here countless times before. Nothing out of the ordinary. My buddy and I are in the front, the other 2 friends are behind us. As we pass by a corridor, I see something out of the corner of my eye. I see something tall that has never been there before. I point to it and ask my friend as he is turning the flashlight away and say, "What the F was that?" He pans the flashlight back over my way, and standing there, maybe 8 feet away, is this tall, hunched over being. The color of its skin was that of a peacock's dark blue/green shimmer. We froze for about 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, all I could see was the color of this thing. It was hunched over with its hands in front of its eyes, like the light hurt it or it was caught off guard. Maybe both. We all turned around and ran as fast as we ever have in our lives, and we never spoke of it again. I get goosebumps and teary-eyed just thinking about this. My great-grandfather's story, Sight of a Creature. This story came to me through my grandmother, whose father, my great-grandfather, used to be a gaucho. For those who don't know, gauchos are basically South American cowboys. They used to drive cattle through the landscape towards the cities, herd animals, stuff like that. He used to drive cattle from Córdoba province towards Buenos Aires city. He did this basically from the beginning of the 20th century almost to the end of it, though by the end, due to fences and different agricultural policies, cattle driving was pretty much dead, so let's say effectively he did this from the 1900s to the 1950s more or less. I have to be clear that Argentina has always been around 10 or 20 years stuck in the past, so when you imagine this place in the 1950s, it was more like the 1930s or 1940s in the US. He used to drive cattle around this area, which consisted mainly of humid plains. There were very few trees in the area. It resembled the humid plains of Texas. He had done this route most of his life, he knew the area, and he had done the trip many times. But then, one of those times, he was up late at night and he started to hear some strange noises. Someone who lives this kind of life knows all the sounds of the area, including those of the animals and birds. They can distinguish whether a sound is from an owl, a dog, or something else. He had never heard this sound before, so he started to ride his horse towards it. The horse grows more and more uncomfortable as he approaches it until he gets to a zone he doesn't recognize. From atop a hill, he sees an area filled with plants that he doesn't recognize, which appear swampy. Although northern Buenos Aires is a humid region, it is not a swamp in the traditional sense. In the middle of the water he saw what he described as very big iguana-like reptiles standing on 2 feet, moving across the water and making that sound he had never heard before. He said they were 2 to 3 horses high. I'm assuming this means as tall as the horse's head or the horse's chest. It was a clear night, so he could see them very clearly. Both he and the horse were terrified. He had never seen creatures like this. After a few moments he decides to go back with the cows and wait. The next morning he goes back again to his place, and the whole area is no more. No more creatures, no more swamp. Either he couldn't find it again or it was not there anymore. Now, there are a few things you must know. My great-grandfather was one of those people who did not make jokes, fool around, or engage in any similar behavior. He was not a drunk either. That night he was awake, he always swore he did not dream it or imagine it. He was ridiculed by most people who heard the story, yet he kept telling it until he died. Also, he was not educated, he never learned how to read or write, schools were not that common in that time. I'm sure what he saw was dinosaurs or something like that, but what amazes me is he couldn't have had the concept of a dinosaur in that time. He used to live in a very rural and isolated area. No cinema, no radio, none of that stuff that might have brought him the idea of a dinosaur, yet he swore all his life he saw that. Do you know someone who has had a similar experience? Have you ever experienced something like a window to the past vision? This story always intrigued me, and I'm just curious if anyone has seen something like this. I'm up to answer any question I can. Once more, I'm not trying to make a joke or a hoax or anything, I just want to share my great-grandfather's story and understand it better. I was vacationing in southeastern Washington. There was a lot of Bigfoot lore there. I didn't want to ask the hippies, so I went to the bait shop. There were lifted trucks everywhere. I asked the good old boys in there, what's up with all the Squatch stuff? They said that they have them and they're around. They're typically seen by the rivers and small streams in that area. He pointed to the mountain behind the shop with a very dense canopy and said there's so much stuff up there. People don't go up there. They come down from that area. They're very aggressive. They throw rocks at people's boats. It was all very matter of fact, like it was no big deal. Almost everybody there said that they had seen them or had some type of encounter, and they had no desire to turn their town into some 3-ring circus. Even though they act like animals, they believe they're very smart and that they have been around as long or longer than us and probably know more about our world than we know about theirs. These were working people. I believe them. My first encounter with an unknown forest entity. This encounter happened last summer. For context, I am a 20-year-old guy living in eastern Norway. This encounter happened when I was 19, either June or July of 2025. My dad and I went on a 400-kilometer drive to the west side of Norway to pick up a car for my sister. And on the way back home I was driving the little yellow Mini Cooper that we picked up, and my dad drove his Subaru in front of me. We took the whole trip without any rest stops to save time. We had made pretty good progress on the way home when it started to get a bit darker since it was about 1 or 2 a.m. Norwegian summer nights don't really get dark, being too far north, so visibility wasn't too bad. The road was quite narrow and not at all straight. The road constantly turned left and right as we descended from a mountainous area, I guess. On the way down we saw a couple of moose by the road, which was right next to a forest. And a bit further down the road I spotted what I thought was another moose and told my dad. We were on the phone pretty much the whole way. He was about 100 meters in front of me and didn't see the animal. I saw it when I entered a left turn around a bend and realized almost immediately that it wasn't a moose. I instead thought it was some kind of deer, hjort, in Norwegian. It was only a couple of meters away from my car at the closest, and it was quite massive. It looked young though, which I thought was weird for such a big animal. I had never seen a deer, hjort, before, so I wasn't sure it was one, but it didn't look quite like any other animal I know about. So I didn't really think about it right then and there. However, upon returning home, I conducted a Google search for Norwegian deer, hjort, and came to the realization that it bore no resemblance to the species. After a lot more Googling, I found out there are only 4 species in the deer family in Norway. Those being moose/elk, elg, red deer, hjort, roe deer, rat deer, and reindeer, reinster. The animal I saw that day didn't look like any of them. It almost looked like a combination of all of them in a way, but I'm not sure. It was at least 2 meters tall at the top of the head. It didn't have any antlers, the face looked almost baby-like, as in it was slightly round and chubby. Its fur was also quite light-colored, almost like sand. But a bit more orange/brownish. The head wasn't shaped like a moose, it wasn't as long. The legs were long and quite thin. The body wasn't fat either, but it looked like a healthy weight for whatever this animal was. The animal was facing me, We made eye contact for a brief moment. I was driving at 50 kilometers per hour if I remember correctly. I saw the animal for maybe 5 seconds. Although 5 seconds isn't a very long time, it was more than enough for me to see what the animal looked like. The animal never moved while I observed it. It was standing still and looking at me as I drove by. I have thought about this encounter many times since it happened and would love to hear theories about what it could be. If you have encountered a similar creature yourselves, I would love to hear about it. You are welcome to ask questions as well. I saw a humanoid skin creature while on a bike ride. Can someone help me figure out what it was? I was on a bike ride near Buffalo, New York. I was going down a street that was a dead end, and what's after the dead end is a massive forest. I was almost to the dead end before I saw a spot ahead of me where there were no houses, nothing but a guardrail and a drainage creek. I looked back at my phone and out of the corner of my eye saw a human figure with no features or clothes and with skin that wasn't really pale but not tan either. It was doing a strange dance. I looked up at it for a few seconds before it vanished. I then saw something past where I first saw the skin creature. It was movement, but I couldn't make out what that was before it was gone as well. I need help. Am I just seeing things? Or was that actually something? And if so, what was it? I was about 10 miles away from the city. It started out as me just taking my dog out to pee. So this is a regrettably real story that occurred a few months ago. I hadn't wanted to tell anyone until recently when I had a get-together at my house and everyone started telling ghost stories. This isn't a ghost story, but it's something that happened I can't explain. One evening, I was cooking dinner. Getting ready to wind down for the evening with my husband, who would be coming home soon. My dog was standing at the front door, staring. I assumed that meant he needed to go out to use the restroom. I grabbed his leash and opened the door, my phone in my other hand. The sun had just sunk behind the mountain, casting the town in twilight. Perhaps now would be a good time to explain that I live in a small town at the base of the Appalachian Mountains. I don't think anything of it. I haven't since I moved here a few years ago. I was drawn here by the cheap rent prices and boundless amounts of outdoor hiking trails available. So imagine my surprise as I'm waiting for my dog to use the bathroom while scrolling on my phone. And my dog starts to growl. So I look up and see him shaking like a leaf, staring. I follow his eyes and see a man, creature, staring right at me. It's hunched down very low to the ground, head peeking around the corner of my building. I was shocked. I was even more shocked when it quickly pulled back behind the corner and ran toward the woods next to my apartment. I thought maybe for a moment I was seeing things. Until my dog tried to run after it. I had to pull on him to get back inside and lock the door. Somehow, I still didn't feel safe. I called my husband because it was the obvious thing to do. That would scare anyone. He immediately told me we needed to do an egg cleanse. If you don't know what an egg cleanse is, it's something many Hispanic cultures will do. They run an egg over your body to cleanse any negative energy that has attached itself to you. You then crack the egg so the yolk goes into a glass of water. Waiting for a while will allow shapes to form, revealing the truth about how and why the energy is affecting you. Imagine my surprise when an eye shape took form very clearly. It was enough to send shivers down my spine for sure. I was told that the creature was curious, watching me, and that I should not worry too much. I'm curious if anyone else has seen any weird gray-skinned humanoid crouching creatures running/crawling into the woods or staring at you. Also, the woods now terrify me. Any advice on how to get over that since they're literally not even 5 feet from my front door? A strange creature. A friend from school told me a story about something that happened 2 years ago in Austria. She was on her way home with a good friend of hers. It was about 9 p.m., and it was quite dark, so there weren't many lanterns. It was near a train station. I don't know if this is important, but just in case. After some time they saw a black figure in the middle of the road right in front of them. It was as small as a little child and did some acrobatics and danced some strange dances. She said that it always looked like you saw a person from behind, but with no colors or anything, just black. At some point this figure stopped with the dance and started to run in the direction where the 2 girls were standing the whole time. As it ran, it began to grow bigger and chase the girls down the road. While it ran, it quickly switched places. One moment it was in the middle of the road, and the next it was on the sidewalk, only to return to the road again. Both say that they haven't heard any sounds coming from it. After some time they turned around, and it was gone. Just gone. After walking for a while, they noticed a shady man behind them, but he suddenly disappeared without a trace. Also, both say that the feeling that came from this figure was really strange and felt quite paranormal and unusual. I've never heard of something like that before, and I'm really wondering what this could be. So maybe someone knows? I would appreciate all the information. The cow graveyard. My friend and I were inseparable. If she was at her house, I was at her house. If I were at my house, that meant she was at my house. This incident happened during the COVID lockdowns. Before I get into the creepy part, I have to explain what the cow graveyard is. So, she lived in a neighborhood right outside of a small town. The houses were probably spaced at least a few hundred feet apart. There was this old man-made stream that had been dried out for quite some time. We called the area the wash. Well, in the wash, there used to be many cow bones from at least 10 dead cows. The bones were clean and old, no skin or hide on them. I liked the cow graveyard because I liked to collect bones of animals that had already passed. One night, while we were at her house during a difficult time, we both experienced a strange feeling. We felt like we weren't real. It's hard to explain, it felt as if we were in a dream, but also not fully present. It had happened to us a few times before, and I always told her that if she felt like that, she should go outside to look at the stars because in my dreams, the sky looks like a painting, not real. So we decided to take a walk and smoke some weed. We had to do it outside because we couldn't get caught by her dad, we were teens. Once outside, I decided I wanted to walk to the wash. The cow graveyard is at the entrance to the wash. She agrees, and we start lazily walking there, taking our time and having weed-fueled conversations about the universe and our purposes. Once we were halfway to the wash, we saw something. We're maybe half a football field's length away, and at first we tried to be rational about it. It looked like an animal digging in the cow graveyard. There was one small issue, it did not look like any kind of animal we had ever seen, and it was twice the size of a damn bear. Once we realized that there is no way that thing could be a dog, we go silent for a good 30 seconds. We felt stuck, like we couldn't run if we wanted to, and the feeling of us not being real came back tenfold. Finally, she breaks the silence, she whispers/yells, "Dude, what the duck is that thing?" And all I had to say was I have no clue. For a moment I thought I was just tripping balls, but she saw the same thing I did. There was no way it wasn't real. Now, I don't really believe in supernatural things or ghosts, so I tried to convince both of us it was a bear. That was until I really looked. It looked like a human standing with both feet on the ground, bent at the waist, and starting to dig with their bare hands in the dirt. The dirt was being flung behind it, maybe up to 7 to 8 feet in the air. At this point she is crying and shaking, begging to go home. I, on the other hand, am not surviving a horror movie, and I tell her I want to get closer, I want to see what the duck this thing is. She's begging me not to walk closer to it. I told her she could go home, but I was going to see what it was. After a bit of arguing, we made the agreement that I can yell at it, and if it doesn't look at us, we can get closer. So, I take a deep, shaky breath, and I shout at it. The moment I do, its head snaps in my direction. At this point it is pitch black outside besides a few distant house lights and my phone's flashlight. I swear to you, its eyes were glowing yellow. The moment I locked eyes with that terrifying cow spirit, my friend was crying, and we were running to her house. We sneak into her bedroom through the window and close the blinds. We did not sleep that night, and we had maybe a 5-minute conversation about what we thought it looked like. The next day, probably 11 a.m., we walked to the wash. Every single cow bone gone. The bones of at least 10 cows have been dug up and removed. The dirt was piled back, and there were no tracks or footprints in it, no sign anyone was there at all. I can't even look at cows the same anymore. My Bigfoot encounter. Around 2003, my sister started doing a rural paper route for some extra cash. She had to leave early in the morning, and it took about 3 hours, so she would ask either my sister or me to ride along with her. She would drive, and we would occupy the passenger seat, placing the newspaper in the mailbox. One morning after the sun had just come up, we had stopped on a long county road, and I rolled down my window to put the paper in the mailbox. While I reached out to deliver the paper, my sister looked down the road and said, "What is that?" I looked on the road, and it appeared to be something very tall with dark hair covering its body. It was standing on 2 legs, walking down the middle of the road. The area we were in was way out in the country of rural Minnesota. We thought maybe it could have been a bear, but even if it was walking on 2 legs down the middle of the road, the legs looked too long to belong to a bear. My sister will still deny that it was Bigfoot, claiming it was just a bear walking on his hind legs, but in the moment she had been so scared that while my arm was in the mailbox delivering the paper, she hit the gas so hard she nearly ripped my arm off. We made an immediate left turn and headed away from whatever it was we had seen. I still don't know what we saw, but there have been multiple claims of Bigfoot in our area. I still think about it when I'm driving down backcountry roads to this day. Alabama dog man sighting? So to preface this, I have always been a little spiritually inclined. I grew up in the southern foothills, and ever since I was young, I've had many encounters with different entities. For years I thought this was just another one of those weird incidents that I wouldn't ever be able to explain. Last night, I started a really interesting book that detailed the folkways and lore of southern Appalachia. I was almost finished reading when some of the words caught my eye. She began to talk about the many cryptids known to the region, and that was the first time I'd ever read the words dogman. I knew immediately, just from the name, that she was referencing the same creature I had seen several years ago. I was probably 17 at the time, and just like most kids, once I got my car, I typically stayed out well past dark. We lived in a small community, about 10 miles from the nearest town. My mother would advise me to avoid being out past midnight if possible, but if I were aware that she was already in bed, I did not feel particularly compelled to hurry home. That night, everything appeared normal. I drove to town, got myself a little midnight snack, and listened to my music in the parking lot while I ate, and then I started heading back home. Once you left town and went over the train tracks, it turned onto that county road. The road was lined with forests for miles, save for a few little side roads that led to houses tucked back behind the woods. At one point, the trees had been cleared from a half-mile stretch, and I would sometimes pull off the side of the road to look at the stars there. I didn't pull over that night, but I did slow down to be able to admire the night sky while I drove past. As the road curved, something caught my eye standing behind a section of tall grass a little further up between the field and the road. My first thought was that someone's car broke down. It had happened to me several times on that road, but when I rounded the bend I didn't see any car. I didn't slow down any more than I had been. I was going about 30 miles per hour. I saw what I thought was a tall, broad guy wearing a heathered gray hoodie. Then I noticed the gray covering its hands and the dark claws that were resting by its side. Of course, my heart kind of dropped. I took in its posture, the slight hunch of its back and how still it was standing. That was when I finally let myself look at its face, and I genuinely saw what I thought was a coyote's face, not just staring back at me but watching me drive past him. As soon as my mind registered what I was looking at, I turned back to the road and stepped on the gas, shouting obscenities because, actually, WTF? I glanced back in my rear view to see if he was still there, and I didn't see him, but that didn't stop me from speeding the rest of the way home. I got the car parked as quick as I possibly could and rushed up the steps, running through the house to my mom's room. I startled her up and told her everything I saw, all about this coyote creature standing on its back legs. At the time, I wasn't very knowledgeable of cryptids. I had heard of skinwalkers before, that was the only way I could think to explain it, and of course that terrified me. I have heard stories about those, and I genuinely began to cry when I contemplated that possibility. I had never heard of anyone seeing one that vividly, and I genuinely thought I was doomed. Of course, I was terrified to drive for a long time after that. I refused to go outside at night for months, and I still get nervous any time I have to travel a back road at night. I'm not sure if I find it comforting, but I'm glad I have an idea of what it was now. I still have more to read about them now that I know I'm not the only one who has seen them, but this is my most vivid encounter. I saw something one night about 15 years ago. We lived in a very rural area in Florida. One night we heard a large commotion coming from the wooded lot behind our house. We were used to sounds from typical critters, foxes, opossums, and raccoons, but this sounded big. Like a person crashing around back there. So we grabbed a couple of flashlights and went to investigate. We walked to the chest-high fence that separated our property from the next lot and began to shine our lights into the woods. The sounds we had been hearing immediately ceased. Then our lights landed on it. There was a creature kind of huddled next to a tree. I have no idea what it was. The closest I can come to describing it was, please don't laugh, a baby elephant. It had a long snout or trunk, not as long as an elephant's, though, but definitely longer than a bear's snout, and it was fairly large, like the size of a large breed dog, and its body was thick/fat. Its eyes were huge and strangely shaped, sort of oblong, being large from top to bottom and narrower if measured side to side. I honestly do not recall much about its legs, except that they were short and thick. It was sitting on its butt, with its back pressed up against an old oak tree. It was terrified. That was what I was sure of. Its fear. It was so strange. It was like I could feel its fear. I was so overwhelmed with its terror but also with compassion for it. I am not a jerk or anything, but the empathy I experienced was extraordinarily intense, almost excessive. It felt similar to how you would feel if you witnessed your child being that scared. It made my heart ache. So my girlfriend and I stared at it for a minute or two and then decided to leave it alone. I can't explain why I didn't hop the fence to get a better look or grab my camera. It was as if all I cared about was stopping it from being scared. It seriously felt at the moment like my GF and I were a couple of monsters encroaching on this poor creature's night. So, that's it. I know it sounds crazy, but my girlfriend was there through all of it, so I know I didn't imagine it. I can't explain any of it. It's been 15 years, and I can't let it go. Somebody, please tell me if you know what it was or how it managed to perform a Jedi mind trick on me, causing me to just walk away without investigating. It's so frigging weird. Random encounter I had a few years back. Wondering if anyone knows what it could have been. So this happened a few years ago close to the ocean in a pretty, foresty part of the USA up on the west coast. I was coming home from the ocean, and the person who was driving had taken a wrong turn, and we were unsure of where we were, but it was an empty road surrounded by forest. We pulled over so the person who was driving could look at a map to try to figure out how to get out of the area, and I looked over towards the dark woods. As it was the middle of the night, I didn't really expect to see anything. Maybe a coyote or two, but what I saw wasn't anything I've seen before. It was what looked like a large wolf, definitely larger than is possible for a regular wolf. When on all fours, it probably stood about 5 feet tall. It was mostly pitch black, but its stomach was a fiery orange color, almost like the color of a red fox but a little brighter, and its eyes were glowing a bright yellow color. It couldn't have been headlights, as they were off, and there was no light around us, so there was nothing to make the eyes appear like they were glowing if they weren't. It stepped all the way out of the woods, and I tried to get the driver's attention, but of course he didn't believe me and continued looking at the map. It came mostly out of the woods and looked at the car before slinking back into the trees and walking away. A few moments after it walked in, it felt like everything went eerily silent, and then a large herd of deer sprinted out of the woods across the street at a very fast pace. I do not believe this to be a werewolf. Does anyone have any ideas as to what it could have been? What was that? So I sadly don't have any evidence because this just happened to me once at night but still left me quite confused. So it's quite simple. I was maybe 9 or maybe even 12 years old, I'm not quite sure. I woke up at night, and I saw a ghost, definitely a ghost, because that thing was glowing blue, like a light blue. It wasn't a blur either, I could see the face, eyes, nose and the long hair. The face was round and resembled a woman's, but the voice sounded more male, though it was not too deep, creepy, or threatening. It looked like a ghost of a normal person, I guess. I was stunned and sat upright in my bed. The ghost said something like too much time or not enough time, I'm not sure which one it was. Then it reached its hand out for my arm, slowly. I was still stunned, but right before it touched me, I realized what it was trying to do, and I shrieked in shock. I also moved my legs and arms, similar to the typical flinch that occurs when something really scares you. This makes me believe it wasn't a dream, as moving in my dreams usually feels odd and is not always easy. It then disappeared and reappeared in front of my desk, looking a bit angry before vanishing completely. By the way, that thing also looked like it was wearing a long white nightgown. The only thing I'm still confused about is that it never came back, not even in my dreams. I'm not sure what it wanted from me either, it just tried to touch my arm. Maybe the ghost didn't come back because I was too loud, and it looked furious and annoyed after I shrieked, but it wasn't giving off any demonic or truly evil energy or aura. Maybe someone has some ideas about what that was. Wicked creatures in Argentina. I am here because I want to share one of my last experiences in the woods of my state, Santiago del Estero. I am actually living in the capital city, that's the point of my career, and I've been here for the big part of my life, by the way. However, once in a while, my mom invites me to spend time at a cottage she shares with her partner, which is about an hour, or approximately 60 kilometers, outside the city. It is a beautiful place with plenty of fish in a humble river and with a lot of wild animals, like cougars and deer, in a huge forest. One of the weekends of the last winter, June 2021 here, I got invited to go hunting, and I accepted. It was like 5 degrees Celsius at 1 a.m., which is common for hunting native deer and hares here. It was so cold. We were in Loreto, a state municipality with ancient military bases and mining yards nearby. I mention this because I believe there is a connection between these creatures and the abandoned station. The point is, the night was getting late, and since we had not caught any animals, my mother's boyfriend, who was with me, suggested we go to an old mining station, and I, who love to explore, agreed. We hear a lot of noise when we get to a house with the door completely broken. Then we thought, there's actually a deer here, and turned on the lights and walked silently because we didn't see another exit for the deer we thought was there. Finally, with the lantern pointing to a square structure, we saw one of those creepy things I didn't believe existed. In that moment I thought it was a homeless person, but this one stays looking at the light like other animals. The guy who was with me told me, WTF hell was that? And I remember not talking because I was trying to understand it. The freaky thing screams pretty noisily, literally like an angry cougar but more shrill and aggressive, and goes running to apparently a hole in the debris that was in that structure. We literally outran them by the confusion and dread, and then we got the van and returned to the house to tell the story. My conclusion. I want to believe that what we saw was a psychotic individual who ended up in that situation for no apparent reason. Alternatively, it could have been a ghoul or some other strange creature. My companion thought it was a sick dog, but I know that he has poor eyesight these days. I don't know if these creatures exist, but after reading about mining areas and similar beings, I feel that this could be something we don't fully understand. But I know that what we saw was not normal, and I don't want to return there if I know that things like that walk around our house and shit like that. Thanks for listening. White creatures in the woodline. I work a job where I take care of mentally unstable people at different houses. I am an overweight worker, and each house normally has 2 or more staff. This evening, I am working at a house with 4 other staff members near a busy road. Now outside the house there are lots of motion lights and stuff like that. The backyard is a decent size. Okay, now to the paranormal stuff. There is a creature at this house that walks the woodline every night, and I would like to know what it may be. It is a tallish creature that appears to be white. My coworker described it as bony looking. You can only see it in the corner of your eye, and when you look directly at it, it disappears. I was told it won't hurt us but is just trying to get a reaction. Does anyone have any idea what it could be? I have not seen it, but almost everyone who works at this house has. Not deer and dog/wolf encounters. When I was a student, I rented a room in a mansion, unaware at the time that the owners were multi-generational billionaires. Otherwise, I would have questioned why such wealthy individuals would rent to students. These people are actually descendants of a Scottish royal lineage, but I didn't learn this until years later. The couple lived there, their children were grown and gone, and in retrospect, it makes no sense that they would rent to students given their immense wealth. Anywho, I had a couple of weird experiences when I lived there, and oddly enough, these weird things only happened when the family was gone on their summer vacation, as they go every year to their summer place on the Upper Peninsula in Michigan. Recently, there has been considerable discussion regarding the elite class and the pacts or rituals in which they are purportedly involved, leading me to contemplate whether this might explain their preference for renting to financially disadvantaged students. And subsequently, unusual occurrences transpire at the mansion. The first incident occurred one night after midnight. I was in my room reading, and my cat was sitting on the windowsill of the small kitchen next door. My wing of the house was on the second floor and consisted of a bedroom, kitchen, and bathroom unit. I heard my cat jump off the windowsill onto the wood floor, and he ran into my room and looked at me like he wanted me to know he had just seen something horrible. Every hair of his fur was standing on end. His tail was like 5 times its regular thickness because all his fur was sticking up. I wondered what on earth he had seen to make him react like that. I had never seen him like that, and never again did I see him like that in his 18 years of life. So, I got up from where I was in my bedroom, and I walked over to the kitchen to look out the window, which faced the back of the house where there was a large yard, parking, and a garage. Standing next to the garage doors approximately 60 feet away was what appeared to be a deer. Its body was facing the garage door, but its head was turned back in my direction, and it looked me straight in the eye. Remember, I'm on the second floor looking down, and the deer is below looking back and up at me. At the time, I was young, naive, and stupid, so I called out to it with endearing terms like, "Aw, look at the deer." It just stood there staring at me, and after a while I just went back to my room like nothing because we were just staring at each other, and well, it didn't move, and it was late. In retrospect, however, I've been concerned because years later I've heard tales of not deer. And it occurred to me that perhaps my cat saw the true nature of the deer, and that's why he was so frightened because I think animals can see things we humans can't. Plus, this happened in a city, so how did this deer get there on paved streets? But if it wasn't a deer, what might it have been? Shapeshifter? Other? A year or two later, once again after midnight, I heard intense growling outside. At first I thought that it might be dogs harassing another dog, so I prepared to go outside to take a look, thinking I might help out the poor animal in distress. I was just about to exit the house when it occurred to me to look outside through the windows first. It was then that I noticed something peculiar. There were what appeared to be 3 immense black dogs just going around in circles growling in the backyard. They looked to be tall like Great Danes, but it was strange that they were all uniform in their extremely muscular shape and color. So at that point, I decided not to go out because something was definitely off. These were not street dogs or strays because they were muscular and well fed. It doesn't make sense that they would have been wolves because of the odd behavior, and this was in a city. I've recounted both these experiences to family, and their thoughts are that the deer wasn't a deer, and if I had gone out, the dogs would have encircled me in the vortex or portal they were creating by going round and round, and I would have been one more missing person. Unknown creature on the road. Could anyone help me identify what this might be? So last Saturday, my boyfriend and I were driving down SR 36, UT, between Stockton and Tooele at probably 11 p.m. and started smelling this horrible smell, like rotting meat. Then he saw something run out from in front of the car ahead of us and run down the left shoulder. I didn't see it, but he described it as about the same height as a coyote but shorter in length and said its head looked smooth and there were no ears and no eye shine. He also noted that it was completely gray. He said it ran unlike any animal he'd seen. It was a quadruped, and its hind legs moved in unison instead of opposite like most canines. I asked him if the creature could be any of the local fauna, such as a fox, coyote, badger, or raccoon. He replied no, expressing certainty that it was none of those animals. He's a trapper and hunter, so he knows his animals. We initially dismissed it, but tonight at about 10:30 on the same stretch of road, he smelled the same odor and saw the same creature again. I'm sharing here because I believe it could be something cryptid related. Does anyone have any ideas? Thanks. Possible cryptid encounter. One night, I remember walking around my house and having a premonition that I was going to see or hear something. I don't know whether it was a sixth sense or just the general malaise I felt while walking through the inky darkness. I was approaching my truck in the middle of the night to grab a charger, and just like in a movie, I heard the cracking of a branch of some sort. I turned back and saw this tall, shadowy figure. It was running along the opposite side of the house, and it was upright like a human. The problem is it's moving so fast that its legs are, I shit you not, moving like road runners in the cartoon. To this day, I still can't begin to fathom what I actually saw or whether I was meant to see it. If it didn't trigger the floodlight, I imagine I wouldn't have even been able to see it moving that fast through the darkness. Maybe I was lucky it did. If you have any idea what it could have been, I'd appreciate it. Central Oregon sighting. Hiya, I'm very uneducated about this kind of thing, so I'm here for some input. Last night I was off-grid in Central Oregon. I was on grounds that had no lights, so we relied on headlamps when we needed to move from place to place. Long story short, I was leaving an outhouse, and behind a wall I noticed out of the corner of my eye a gray/white figure. When I turned to look at it, I heard a whisper hiss-like sound, like a hash, as it disappeared from sight. The vines on the wall rustled, and I saw a blur of movement, but besides that, there was no proof of life, no further movement or rustling of foliage. I did an audible what the F but tried to remain calm and walked as fast as I could without running back to the cabin. I did some digging and found crawlers to be similar. I don't believe this location is prone to skinwalkers, but I could be wrong. I dunno. I'd love any opinions or other stories. A white, swaying creature stalked me and chased my car at Settles Bridge Park, Georgia, July 3, 2025. This happened a year ago in 2025 on the 3rd of July at around 12:40 to 3:50 a.m. I am 4 feet 11 inches, and was 27 at the time this happened. I had pepper spray and not much else. This event made me get a CC weapon/license for protection. My brother and his friends made a fort 3 miles away from the Settles Bridge Park parking lot deep in the woods. It was the 3rd of July, and I arrived late, at around 12:40 a.m. They had already gone ahead of me to the fort. I had to walk down the forest trail alone. My phone only had 16% battery, so I decided to save my battery by using the full moon as my light source. The first half of the trail is an old logging road that starts on the left side of the parking lot that's overgrown, and on both sides of it are trees. I get about halfway down that logging road when I notice a tall white figure standing in front of a tree on the left side, rocking side to side. I started immediately doing mental calculations as I continued walking towards it. I tried to think about going back to my car, but every cell in my body was telling me that was a horrible idea. Something in my gut told me it wasn't human. It also told me not to react and to keep going, so I did. I walked right past it and continued walking down that logging road till I took a sharp left into the trees about 10 feet before the logging road ended. I walked 2-ish miles down a really hard to navigate trail till I found the fort by moonlight. The fort was built on the other side of an old fence. I crawled underneath a gap in the chain link and joined my brother and his friends at the campfire and didn't say anything. At some point, my bro told me to get firewood, so I started searching for it with a flashlight they gave me. We had this belief that the other side of the fence was unsafe and that our side was safe from the spooky shit we've felt and seen. We were wrong. Because as I was walking up a hill, looking for firewood, I saw the profile of something with a flat face standing on all fours about 75 feet away at the top of the hill. I told myself it was a deer, abandoned the firewood, and sat at the fire and said nothing. We shot off some guns into the hill I had climbed, did some drinking, I abstained, set off some fireworks in a clearing we made, and smoked. My brother came with his friend, and we decided he would drive us back home in my car. The walk back was uneventful, and when we got in the car, I sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, looking for it. As my brother backed up the car, that's when I saw it again. It was standing on two legs among the trees, around 50 feet deep in the woods, directly in front of where we parked our cars. It had followed us or was already waiting, knowing we would have to return to the lot. I swear to God, man, I watched it drop to all fours and break into a dead sprint. This thing ducking chased my car on all fours and kept up with it. We were driving 35 miles per hour, and it kept up, running zigzag through the trees. It veered away when it reached the housing fence line. I don't know what that thing is, but I've seen it several more times since. The fort was disassembled on order of the nearby HOA. You will only find the structural remains and an old deer stand. My brother and I both had a recent encounter with it a few weeks ago in May on the 22nd. On the 22nd of May, I promised my brother we would meet at the lot to smoke. He had finally gotten his own car, so he no longer had to drive mine. I remember turning onto the gravel road that led to the lot and getting a bad gut feeling. A sense of not being welcomed. This feeling isn't unusual. It usually is the prelude to some supernatural, paranormal, weird shit happening. My brother and I are both familiar with this feeling. We feel that way all the time in those woods, we're used to it. Sometimes, we see or hear something, but usually, we just get a bad leave the forest now, get the F out, you aren't welcomed feeling and some strange noises. It's not that intense, so I don't expect much to happen. I park my car, lock my doors, and put my brights on. I'm parked facing the direction I saw the white creature in 2025. I always park in that direction. It's a habit. As I'm sitting there waiting for my brother to pull up in his car, I start seeing something walking through the trees. It's about 70 feet deep into the woods, but I don't have enough light to tell for certain if it's the creature or if it's an animal or person. My brother pulls up, opens his door, freezes, and turns on his brights. We both watch a pale creature, around 7 feet tall, peek and peer at us from between two trees. It kept ducking behind them, then poking its head back out again. It was humanoid and had a flat face, stood on two legs, and was gripping one of the trees with its hands for stability. I can't remember whether or not its eyes glowed in the light or if it had eyes at all. We watched it for a few minutes before leaving. We drove to a soccer field a few miles away and smoked there instead. This creature is why I will never open my window at night again. This is a true story, and it haunts me every single night. It all started on a Tuesday night around 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm lying alone in bed in the dark, and my window is cracked open. I prefer having a breeze at night to stay cool. I open my window every single night. It doesn't matter if it's hot or cold or windy or rainy, I will open my window. Anyways, I had to share this because it is really haunting me. To explain, all of a sudden the noise started. I remember my eyes rapidly opening and the shivers being brought down my spine. It was extremely paralyzing, causing my entire body to jolt as if a shockwave were coursing through my nerves. This sensation is especially intense at night when you are startled by a noise like your old house settling. But this was unlike anything I've ever experienced. To begin with, the noise that startled me appeared to be a man shouting from a distance of approximately a quarter of a mile. I thought to myself that this was extremely unusual. I live in a desolate area, and I don't have many neighbors around. So it couldn't have been them. I live in a woodsy area in a humble neighborhood. Most people who live here are hermits and don't leave their homes unless it's for the biweekly grocery shopping or leaving in the morning to go to work. But the screams were very specific and were arranged in a pattern. They almost sounded inhuman. A loud but faint yell would sound about every 2 seconds, and the yells were unintelligible words and lasted for about 1 to 2 syllables. It was almost perfect, sounding like a recording of a shout played again and again and again but for hours. The dreadful sound stayed in place for 3 hours of non-stop yelling, and the man never seemed to move locations except for when the noises slowly got farther away, and that's when it seemed to stop. The sounds lasted from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. I assume the man making the disturbance is in his early 30s. It haunts me to think of someone just standing in the forest blatantly yelling words for 3 hours straight in the middle of the night. The sounds didn't appear like they were desperate, as if they were in need of any help. The only drastic thing would be if a bear mauled you to death, but no one's stupid enough to go out at night like this. The shouts sounded emotionless and, of course, very terrifying. I eventually was able to catch my breath and peek out the window. The noise was not caused by the wind, nor was it a branch scraping my window, despite what some might claim to debunk my experience. But I was too afraid to go outside and investigate. I had to debate whether calling the police would be the right thing to do or not. I kept my ear close to the window for a few minutes, and I was starting to decrypt what he was saying. It sounded like it was in a different language or a gibberish word being spoken, but it was very strange. I know I'm not crazy, and I know what I heard. I will probably never open my window ever again, since I would rather not find out who or what was making those sounds, and I definitely do not want them to come back. Does anyone know what this could be? I asked my neighbors if they heard, and only 1 out of 4 claimed they did. We both don't know what it was. The creature took the form of a deer? I live in rural Kansas, born and raised. I've seen some wild things where we live, and my husband has witnessed more because he's a hunter to put food on the table. Last night we were driving home from a friend's house with our 1-year-old. It was about 9 p.m., and a storm had just rolled through. It was still lightning and thundering. As we crested the hill, my husband and I saw what looked like a large dog on the side of the road, so he slowed down to let it cross. It didn't walk like a dog, instead, it moved like a predator, resembling a mix between a large dog and a mountain lion, with a long tail, long floppy ears, and a short face. As it crossed the road, we were silent. We watched it jump a barbed wire fence and disappear behind a single pine tree, and we decided, what the hell? And drove forward to get a look at it again on the other side of the fence. When we pulled forward, a large white-tailed doe was staring at us. We thought our eyes played tricks on us, and I looked at my husband and said, "That wasn't a ducking deer," and we drove home confused the whole time. We get home, and he calls his dad and asks if he has ever seen anything like it since they used to hunt in that area when he was a kid. He said there were always weird things in that area that no one had ever seen, but you would always hear them. I have seen deer exhibit strange behaviors that are not typical for deer or chronic wasting disease. I have never seen a deer walk with its head down, ears flopped to the side of its head, and stalk like a predator. It didn't have hooves, its tail was so long. What did we see? I have no idea what this was. I work in vacuum hauling at a remote industrial site in the mountains. There is one area at work that has always felt off to me. I can't explain it, but whenever I'm in that spot, the hair on my neck stands up for no reason. One night while I was driving the vac truck, something suddenly jumped out in front of me and crossed the haul road. I only got a quick look at it, but it was roughly the color of a deer. The strange part was how fast it crossed. It made it across the road in about 2 steps. This was not a narrow road or a small bush trail. This was a haul road wide enough that 2 haul trucks could stop side by side in that spot. By the time I got the vac truck stopped safely and got out to look, whatever it was had already disappeared. I want to be clear that I have zero real knowledge of cryptids or this kind of stuff. I am not claiming it was Bigfoot or anything specific. I honestly do not know what I saw. It could have been a normal animal seen quickly in bad lighting, but the way it moved and the distance it covered in only a couple of steps have stuck with me. The part that bothers me most is that it happened in the same area that already gives me a bad feeling every time I am there. I'm sharing this to see if anyone else has spotted a deer-colored animal moving similarly along remote mountain or mine roads or has any idea what it could have been. 2006, Northwood, New Hampshire. I was working at a Boy Scout summer camp in Northwoods, New Hampshire. It was a Wednesday night when the staff got a break and got to go to Concord, about 15 to 20 miles away. I was driving home with 3 other staff members in my car. I pulled into Blake's Hill Road, the road the camp was on. It was a less taken care of side road, mostly surrounded by forest. It was about midnight, I was driving a bit over the speed limit, and there was patchy fog. As I turned a corner, a deer shot out in front of my car. The deer had long, unusual looking legs that appeared to have extra joints. Also with a wide alligator-like mouth and oversized deep black eyes. I felt a panic so remarkably deep. As I rounded the corner, this crazy deer darted in front of my car. I thought I hit it, but there was no bump. Like nothing was there. I hit the brakes, and it took me a few yards to stop. I sat there and asked the guys in my car if they saw that. 2 of them said yes, one in the back seat behind me, I guess, was dozing off and didn't see it. I then got out, the uneasy feeling was subsiding. I didn't find anything, anyone, any deer, or anything. 2 weeks later on a very hot day in early August, a thunderstorm was rolling in. My 3 friends, who I was with, went to the lakeside to see the storm come in from the water. We watched a big supercell storm roll over the lake. When it was right above us, all of a sudden the wind picked up. The wind increased in intensity until the tops of the trees began to snap. My friends and I began to run to the service center for shelter. The trees around us continued to fall, all around us as hail was pelting us. Trees smashing cars and cabins. Then blackness. For a few seconds I was unconscious. I came to, and my back and head were screaming in pain. I had been hit by one of the falling trees. It took a few minutes for help to arrive, the staff members of the camp. I was then carried half a mile over a destroyed road and mess. I had to get 10 sutures on the back of my head, and I had received a compression fracture in my L3 vertebra. It was declared that a microburst had hit the camp. I had the worst injury. Nobody else got hurt. I saw a strange creature. Can anybody help me identify it? Many years ago I saw 2 strange animals outside of a church at night. Upon doing research, I came to the conclusion that they were not raccoons. They were far too big and didn't look the same. I do not know what color they were, as it was too dark. They were walking under a roof. It had bars around it to keep homeless people from sleeping there. They couldn't have been someone's pet because I have been in this area many times and have never seen one. They couldn't have been dogs. I'd say they resembled moles if anything. I imagine there wouldn't be any moles in the middle of a city, though. I live in British Columbia, Canada. The only details I remember were that they had large backs, like a humpback, were walking on all fours, and had fat tummies. I don't think they were turtles, too large to be in the middle of a city. Was it some type of mythological creature? Does anybody know? I need help identifying a creature that my sister and I saw during our childhood, a green goblin-like being that resembled Yoda. There were 2 encounters I, 22 female, and my sister, 20 female, had in childhood with the paranormal. My sister and I have had more individual experiences, but these 2 are the most memorable because we can corroborate them. I'm also sure my sister has more details than I can provide here, but for this I'm just going off what she has told me in the past about our experience. Please note that I may be misremembering some details, but the core idea is still there. We used to share a room together when we were children. I don't even remember exactly how old we were, but we had to have been preschool or kindergarten age. She had a little white plastic toddler bed, while I had a Disney princess bed with a pink Sleeping Beauty canopy. Pretty sure this was around 2007 due to the old Disney princess branding. It's weird because I don't have any pictures of me in this bed, but I remember telling my dad how much I liked it, and I remember that's how I learned the word canopy. To preface further, I honestly feel weird typing this or even remembering this because it feels wrong. It has honestly traumatized me for a long time for some reason. Especially because of the profound impact it had on my sleeping habits and the distinct sound the creature made. It saddens me to reflect on how small I was and how everything appeared so frightening in the modest townhouse we resided in. I even still vividly remember some nightmares I had while living there in addition to an astral projection experience, that I didn't recognize as being astral projection for a long time. Early childhood is already traumatizing enough due to everything being new and scary, even without experiencing paranormal shit on top of that. Anyways, one night I woke up in the middle of the night to a dark room, my sister beside me. I can't remember if she was awake or not. I'm lying on my back with a full view of the foot of my bed and the rest of my body. All of a sudden, I hear this bassy shoo-whoop boom sound with a metallic echo. I remember the sound so ducking vividly, but it's super hard for me to describe or reproduce. Just think of the sound of something suddenly erupting from the ground combined with when you bump a metal water bottle against a metal pole. I see this green creature suddenly shoot up into existence from the ground, and it makes the aforementioned sound. I don't remember exactly where he was located, as I'm pretty sure he was walking/moving, but I'm pretty sure it was from the corner of my footboard, so the lower part of his body was obfuscated by it. The way I've been picturing him all this time is exactly like Yoda from Star Wars. The details may have changed over the years, as that description has been the best way for me to convey what I remember, and my memory may have adapted to fit it. It's also weird because I've never seen Star Wars and never will. I'm sorry, y'all, I can't do it. He was super short and green and was wearing a brown burlap robe. I think the ears were protruding, kind of like Yoda. I was so ducking terrified, though, that I immediately turned around onto my stomach and pulled the covers over my head, praying that it would go away. This experience is literally the reason why I'm still a stomach sleeper and sleep every night with the covers over my head lol. I remember lying in that position for a while and finally gaining the courage to look back at the room, and thankfully it was gone. The thing is my sister remembers some details that I couldn't. She woke up as well during the experience. She said she saw a green cloud of smoke over the whole room. I definitely remember this as well, but it was still very dark in the room, and I hadn't fully woken up yet. She said she saw the green guy actually standing on top of me while I was sleeping. I never actually saw this part, so maybe it occurred before I woke up or after I turned onto my stomach. I do remember the creature starting from the footboard and progressively teleporting around to the side of the bed as I blinked, and it probably eventually ended up on top of me. I don't remember what happened afterward, but I think the door opened and one of my parents came in because we were crying. It was genuinely so traumatizing. Frankly, I don't care if people believe me or not because I feel in my body that this shit was real. I am uncertain about the nature of that entity, whether it was a collective hallucination, a dream, sleep paralysis, a fairy, possibly an alien, or perhaps a spirit. I simply do not know. Maybe it was harmless, maybe it was evil. All I know is that it scared the shit out of little me. The second, more minor experience happened when my sister and I were playing in the basement. This was in a different home, and I'm pretty sure we were a couple years older. It was approximately Halloween, as my mother was upstairs preparing treat bags for the trick-or-treaters. I'm pretty sure we had some Halloween decorations in the basement as well. She and I were sitting on the floor and talking while playing. Up against the wall in the basement was one of those black folding plastic outdoor tables that we usually used for events or get-togethers. For some reason, both of us stop and turn to look at the table. We both see a green disembodied hand start to emerge from underneath the table towards the ground. We both looked at each other and of course freaked the duck out and started screaming and running upstairs. Anyways, I have no idea who the duck this green hoe is and why my sister and I saw him twice. We only ever saw the green hoe when we were together. Also, I apologize for any inconsistencies in the story. I was literally a barely conscious child, so my memory may be a bit skewed and blended with others. Open to any ideas or if anyone has any similar experiences to share. I believe I and a friend saw what would be called a dogman. We were driving down very rural roads here in Montana looking for his phone he lost a few days earlier. He was drunk when he called me to ask for help. I had a few beers, but I wasn't drunk, so I thought I'd help him. These roads are very rural, there's hardly any traffic ever, except for a few locals. We followed his supposed route looking for the phone he said he lost when he got out to piss and fell down. Followed these roads for 30 miles or so and then turned back. The sun was starting to set, so it's getting pretty dusky outside. Is that a word? I don't think dusky is a standard word, but I'm using it anyway. I'm still half-heartedly looking for his phone near the ditch of the road. There were a few times I thought I saw something that could be a phone, so I stopped and had him check it out. Nope, not a phone. Well, about 15 miles back to town, so about 15 miles more to go. It's damn near dark out, I have the high beams on, and I see a figure crossing the road about 30 to 40 yards ahead of us, and it's huge. At first I think elk, that would be the most common, but it's not moving like an elk. Then I think moose are kind of gangly looking, so they move weird, but they are rarely seen in my area. It has happened but very rarely. So now I'm thinking it might be a bear. It moves somewhat like a bear, but it's much too large to be a black bear. Grizzlies are almost unheard of in this part of the state. It has happened, but it's extremely rare, so I'm thinking this is a very, very cool experience. But then this creature does something that completely astonishes me. Keep in mind all this is happening really fast, so my mind is trying to explain logical reasons to myself while this thing lumbers across the road. When I say lumber, I don't mean it's clumsy, it moves in a very methodical and very fluid motion. This damn thing gets to the edge of the road, stands up on two legs, and walks into the ditch like a person would. Once again very fluid-like. I've seen bears walk on two legs. There is even a bear in Colorado somewhere that does this all the time, and it looks pretty creepy, to be honest, but this was not a bear. I repeat, this was not a bear, at least not one that I've ever seen. It could have been the height of or taller than a grizzly standing on its hind legs, but from my estimation, it would have had to have been quite a bit taller for what it did next. It walked down into the ditch and up the other side, casually walking over the 4.5-5 foot fence like we would walk over a short picket fence for a garden. And when it walked over the said fence, it stared back at us. I could clearly see the side profile of the head as it was turning to look at us. It looked nothing like a bear. It looked like a ducking wolf head, except 2 to 3 times as large. The arms were far too long to be bear and lacked the amount of fur, or the girth that resembles fur, I suppose, that one would expect. I could swear I saw long fingers with claws at the end of each arm. Its movements, the way it glanced at us, and its overall appearance all screamed werewolf to me. I have never seen anything like it. But I hope to see it again. I wasn't really scared when I saw it. I wasn't even scared after the fact. It just seemed like an extremely rare and unique experience. But the way it moved into the ditch and crossed the fence screams. To me, this is not an animal that is a quadruped. This is a very unique animal. After it was all over and it disappeared into the darkness on the other side of the fence, My friend looked at me and asked if I had seen that. I said yes. Explain to me what you saw. He did, and it was almost the exact description of what I had seen as well. I asked him what he thought it was. And he said, these are his words, not mine, werewolf, and then chuckled a bit. But that was my exact thought as well. I did some research, and there have been many sightings and such all over the world. There are even quite a few in the US. As such, the first sighting, or actually documented sighting, of a werewolf was in Minnesota, I believe. They didn't call it a werewolf but a dogman. And I firmly believe that I have seen one. Like I said, I wasn't scared, it didn't seem malevolent in any way, it was just going about its business. If anything, when it looked at us, it just seemed curious. Anyways, this is my story. I really don't think anyone will believe it, but I thought I'd share with my favorite community. I know this isn't like the stories I usually share. But I just wanted to share it. Thank you for listening to my story. Weird encounter while fishing. I live in southern Ohio. I went fishing 3 days ago. Typically, I am accompanied by my younger brother, 13, or a friend, 21, but it was 8 in the morning and everyone was still asleep, so I decided to go alone. Didn't think much of it considering I'm 20 myself. I've been to this pond more times than I could keep track of, so I felt quite comfortable by myself. I do not engage in concealed carry or anything of that nature, however, I arrived there at approximately 8:30. I fished for about an hour, checking my phone around 9:20, seeing how much time had passed since it was moving so slow with no bites. I moved around the pond toward a little cove where there was moss all over the ground and trees hanging over. It looked beautiful until, whatever this was, 10 minutes or so after I checked my phone, the few birds I did hear went quiet. I don't know if they just went quiet or if the propeller plane above scared them. I'm not usually scared of things in the woods, except for other people, so when my skin started crawling with anxiety as if someone were watching me, I felt there had to be someone nearby, maybe a game warden or something. I checked my wallet to make sure I had my Florida license with me, and 10 to 15 seconds later, I realized I wouldn't have felt this way if I weren't ignorant about the animals we have here. In Ohio, I would have thought there was a tiger or lion behind me because I heard a deep growl. Later, when I got home, I looked up the sound of their growl and compared it to a real lion's growl to see how it matched what I heard. The sound I heard did not seem to come from a large animal. It lacked the deep bass and was not as loud or sudden. Think of a lion growling in a quiet room, that's the best as I can describe it. Anyways, I hurried and reeled in, not thinking twice, but as I got around the pond near where my catfish pole was set up. I had a catfish pole set up at the entrance and was bass fishing around the edge of the pond while waiting. I figured I'd cast one more time since I wasn't deathly scared since, at the time, the most I thought it could be was a slight chance it could be a mountain lion. I'm the type of person that thinks I can beat a mountain lion with a knife, stupid, but I guess the mind likes to believe, so that's why I wasn't too scared. The moment my artificial lure hit the water, near where I had just been standing, about 70 feet away from the mossy floor and the overhanging trees, I heard a sound that resembled either a branch breaking against a tree or a rock striking a tree. One of those three things told my parents, and they swear up and down it was everyone's favorite Bigfoot, but I just can't get with the theory of Bigfoot being real. Ever since, I haven't been back to that pond, and I don't think I'll ever go back considering how unexplainable that was. Does anybody have any idea what this could have been, or has anybody had a similar encounter? I live in southern Ohio, about 2 hours away from Kentucky, which is why I thought it could be a mountain lion. However, I am still confused. I'd rather know than just assume it was a cougar. Crazy tall, impossibly thin and with long arms/legs? Slate Springs, Mississippi, USA. I know this is going to sound ducking crazy, but I don't really care. I'm not a stranger to weird stuff even if I don't understand it. I do understand that it happened, and afterwards I always pep talk myself for hours to not gaslight myself into believing it didn't happen. This is one of those times. Approximately a year ago, while performing late night cleaning, I approached my back door just before midnight to dispose of some dirty mop water. The backyard was fairly large, 1/4 acre or so, and surrounded on 3 sides by thick foliage. The 4th side was the closest to the back door and shared a low shrub with my neighboring house, an empty house that no one had ever lived in. So it's dark back there in rural Mississippi at night. So I open the storm door and go to step down the 3 small cement stairs into the backyard, but before I can get more than 1 foot out, I see something from my left side, just on the neighboring house's side of the shrubbery. I literally startled really hard and dropped the mop bucket down the steps at the same time as I exclaimed, "Holy shit." The only way I can explain this thing is by asking you to imagine Slender Man, tall, white, impossibly thin, with arms and legs that are unnaturally long and frightening. But it was like I don't know, it was wearing some sort of cloaking device, maybe. One that had glitched out partly? I only could see it from about the shoulders down to below the knee, the head and lower legs were invisible. The hands also hung low. It was glowing, but not brightly, just like radiating a 2-3 dull white glow around the visible bits. It had been walking at a brisk pace. I startled it when it startled me. And it stopped dead and went entirely invisible. But it was still there, I could feel it watching to see what I was going to do. It felt as if they were surprised that I had noticed its presence. I'm guessing it didn't realize it was showing some of itself, or its invisible mechanism had short-circuited or whatever was happening. I froze, and then it became completely invisible, remaining still as it waited. After a few seconds I gathered myself and said out loud, "Yep, nothing to see here. I'm going to go inside my house and mind my damn business. Carry on." I walked into my bedroom and sat next to my boyfriend watching TV, and I stared at the floor for about a minute and a half, trying to make sense of it. He looked at me finally and wanted to know why I was looking crazy as hell, so I told him. He clearly did not believe me. He asked if I wanted him to go check it out, and I instinctively told him no. Do nothing. And at that moment my little schnoodles, I have two, started losing their minds, barking from the back door to the kitchen window in the room adjoining the back door. They were barking intensely, which was unusual for them and typically only happened when they were certain someone was about to knock. He looked at me again, clearly confused, so I shook my head once more and told him I was serious. Do nothing. Don't go out there. I don't know if the experience was actually just something that didn't matter but made me feel better, but the next night I opened the back door around the same time and said out loud that from then on, from 11:30 p.m. to 12 a.m., I would not be coming out that way in case this was a regular footpath for the thing. I didn't let my kids go out at those times, and I honored it till I moved out in February this year, and I did not see it again. What was it? Anyone? I grew up on a 75-acre farm in East Texas. The Arklatex specifically. Now that I'm an adult piecing all these together, I realize this thing has been a part of my life much longer than I originally thought. The first ever sighting I can remember was when I was 8, it was probably 11 p.m. in pitch black. I was crossing our bridge over a small creek to get to the fire pit only a few meters away. But before I could get there, I stopped in my tracks because I saw two red eyes staring back at me. I couldn't give you the exact height, but 8-year-old me could tell it was taller than my grandfather, therefore, it was not my grandfather, and therefore, I needed to haul in the opposite direction. I quickly ran back to the house in tears and told him what happened. He told me it was just a spider's eyes reflecting in the moonlight. Believing he knew all there was to know, I accepted this explanation and forgot about it. Until 2016. The second sighting I can recall was when I was 16 or so. Same plot of land, just on the opposite end where my mother had decided to build her house. Around 7 p.m. I went for a walk down to my mother's pond. About halfway there, I see a white figure in the very top of a pine tree next to the pond. It quickly shuffled behind the foliage out of sight, so I could just see speckles of white peeking through. At first I thought, an albino raccoon. I was not at all scared. But something quickly turned my gut in my stomach and told me to turn around and head home. So I did and instantly was overwhelmed with crippling fear, like that of sleep paralysis. I speed walked my way back to the house. I don't remember if I mentioned it to my mother at this point or at the fourth sighting, which was by far the scariest. The third time I saw it, either the same year or the next, I was on my way to the pond again. This time it was between me and the pond, on the ground, on all fours. Here I had a pretty good visual, and the best description I've been able to come up with is a very tall man in a full-body white spandex suit. Again, I got scared and speed walked home. I never ran. Something always told me to not run. The fourth time I saw it was not long after the last two. It was around 10 p.m., and I realized I forgot to feed my horse. I walked out to his pen with my flashlight out. Before I got all the way there I saw his eyes shining at me, so I excitedly skipped up to him. When I got near him, he made a very strange huffing noise I hadn't heard him make before. It was at this point I heard rustling. In a different area of the pen, where I shined my light, and saw my horse. What was 4 feet in front of me was not my horse. My body went rigid, and I had to fight every cell in my body to make my legs take me back to the house. When I made it back in, I went to tell my mother, but she had gone to bed. I waited the next day and told her everything. My mom's an avid believer in weird things like that, so she listened to me intently and, rather than telling me it was nothing, told me that, whatever it was, she'd cleanse/bless the house, and it would go away. Now I don't believe this thing is a ghost, so I don't think it can be cleansed out. But I didn't see it again for the remaining time I lived there. I moved to a big city 8 hours away and forgot all about it. Up until recently, when it's been on my mind quite a lot. I will be going home to see my mother soon. I certainly don't expect a sighting. Nor do I want one. I always feel like the next time I see it will be my last. Or that it's an omen of death. I don't know. I do know this creature had many, many opportunities to hurt me and did not. It just scared me shitless. I should also add that I mentioned this to one other person, a friend of mine. When I gave my friend its description, she became very upset and asked to change the conversation. After some prying, she eventually told me that she had seen the same thing at a lake 30 minutes from my house, Elliott/Texarkana Lake, and that it had chased her and another girl on all fours. She again asked to change the conversation and never mention it again. If anyone else in the East Texas area is in this community and has seen this creature, I'd love to hear about it. As much as it scares me, I still struggle with convincing myself it was real. Creepy encounter. Whether or not this story is true, I can't say for sure. But there were 3 eyewitnesses, and one of the witnesses I know and worked with. This man doesn't really strike me as a dramatic storyteller. So take this all as you will. To be completely honest, I am unsure of what to make of it. So here we go anyway. Here is some background information before I share the actual story he told. I used to work with this man at a food processing station, and he was a trucker. I stopped working with him almost 2 years ago. His name for privacy reasons is D. My mother currently works with him. She basically handles all of the truckers' load weights and keeps track of their routes to send to corporate, and she handles the truckers' paperwork. 2 days ago, D told my mom about an encounter he just had. He was on a trucking run in North Carolina. I don't remember where specifically, I think it was in Pender County. He needed to use the bathroom, and he had also reached the maximum limit for his road hours. So he stopped at a quiet truck stop to go to the restroom. There was no one else in there. While he was on the toilet doing a number 2, he heard the door open and what sounded like sandals or flip-flops walking in. Then he heard a voice say, "Let me in, let me in, let me in." He sees a face peek through the crack in the stall door. He describes it as about 4 feet tall, pale, living, and moist-eyed. It had abnormally long, skinny, crooked fingers. He said it began banging on the door. Then it began shoving on the door. The latch on the stall door broke, so D put both of his feet on the door to stop that thing from coming in. It then went into the stall beside him. He saw these abnormally long, crooked, skinny fingers reach over, grabbing the rail, about to climb over. Its face peeks over the stall, and D punches at this thing, but he describes how his hand went through it. He screamed and then this thing let out a deafening screech that D describes as like a train when it comes to a sudden stop. D pulls up his pants and runs out. This thing runs out of the bathroom. Another trucker, a large black man D described as about 300 pounds, was walking to that bathroom. The creature runs at this man and knocks him over as it runs past him. This man looks at D, asking him, "What was that thing? I used to be a football player, and that thing just threw me like nothing." Both of the men decide to get out of there. There were bushes nearby their trucks, so the men walk to their trucks together because they thought that would be safest. They get in their trucks and begin to pull out of this truck stop. D looks in his mirror and sees 3 creatures standing in the same spot where he and the other man had just been. D takes a picture of these creatures as he drives out. He then talks to the black man over their radios. But as D turns his radio on, he hears the same voice from the bathroom. It just repeated, "Let me in, let me in, let me in." The black man talks to D over the radio, asking him if he hears that voice too. He agrees that he hears it. They then decide to check each other's trucks, passing each other in turns, to make sure nothing is on their truck. The trucks are clear, so they drive for a while and stop at another truck stop a long ways off from the previous. D and the other man that he was now traveling with get out at this truck stop. And they see an older man that was security at this new truck stop. D and the other trucker he was with hear this security guard while in the truck stop say, "Oh no, those things are back again." All 3 men run to their vehicles. The security guard's car wouldn't start, so D and the black trucker decide they can't leave the poor old guy and help the man. After D and the other trucker leave and keep driving despite D being over his time limit for trucking. He said he was so terrified he would rather not stop. He didn't care that he was over his time limit. He'd rather get in trouble with the law than stop to even chance seeing those things again. D told his wife about what he saw and said she does not believe him at all. He now believes in supernatural creatures. D went to show his wife the picture he took of the creatures. But in the photo nothing was there. Again, I do not know how true any of these claims are. If it even has an ounce of truth to it at all. I simply was not there. My mother seems convinced by his reaction while telling the story. She is not usually the gullible type. But still, take this all with a grain of salt. True or not, it is still an interesting story. Has anyone ever encountered a tall, tree-like creature? For background, I used to be a heavy skeptic.
However, my friends and I, a group of 3 to 6 people, including me, began to commonly frequent Ghost Road, aka Bragg Road, in Saratoga, Texas, to ghost hunt.
It's a popular area for its ghost lights and other activity. We get lots of activity on spirit boxes, EMF readers, etc. down this road. But recently we picked up something that isn't paranormal. This creature, dubbed Carl, is as tall as the pine trees down here in southeast Texas, lanky as hell, and startling at first glance. However, he just sits back and watches us from a distance. He's never really been aggressive or gotten too close. He doesn't really have much of a face, at least as far as I can tell. When we see him, he tends to stop moving. The minute he does, we basically lose track of him among the trees. I've tried researching everything to figure out what this thing is, but every result is fruitless. Hopefully someone here has answers, as our entire group is super confused about this. I'm an SCDNR officer. I saw something during a coyote operation on Kiowa Island that I still can't explain. I am currently a wildlife officer with the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. Most of my career has been spent working in coastal counties. I've dealt with nuisance alligators, stranded dolphins, black bears, feral hogs, coyotes, and just about every other wildlife issue you can think of. Because of that, I've always been pretty skeptical when it comes to stories about anything paranormal. My job is usually figuring out what actually happened and finding the explanation that makes the most sense. So, to start this off, this incident happened in November of 2024 while I was a part of a coyote management operation on Kiowa Island. Most people along the South Carolina coast already know that coyotes have become a major problem for loggerhead sea turtles in the past 5 years. During nesting season they'll find the freshly laid nests, dig them up, and eat the eggs before the hatchlings ever get a chance to reach the water. We have been seeing increasing nest losses on the island, and part of our job was trying to identify where the most active coyotes were and reduce some of that predator pressure before the next nesting season arrived. I started just before sunset, which is pretty normal for that kind of work since coyotes start hunting and being active in the evening. I was one of several DNR officers on the island that day. We were all spread out across different sections of the island and took positions near areas where coyotes had been seen regularly. The plan I was told to follow was fairly straightforward. Watch travel routes, identify active animals, and gather information that would help us deal with the problem animals later. I was working on the western side of the island in one of the few remote marsh areas left that hadn't been fully developed yet. I was between a tidal creek and the maritime forest. I had worked that section before and knew it fairly well. One of the major things I remember most about that evening was how low the tide was. There were large stretches of exposed mudflat that normally would have been underwater. The weather was clear and visibility was pretty good considering the sun had already gone down. For the first hour or so, everything was pretty normal. I saw a few wading birds moving around the mudflats and noticed some coyote signs along one of the creek edges. Other than that, there wasn't much going on. After a little while I noticed movement out in the marsh. I honestly thought that it was going to be a regular coyote. I mean, that's what I was there looking for, after all. I couldn't really tell me exactly what it was, though, because it was far enough away to where I needed to use my binoculars to get a better look. The weirdest part to me was that I immediately realized it wasn't a coyote. At first I thought it was a person. The figure was standing near one of the grass islands roughly 250 yards away. Distance can be difficult to judge across open marsh, especially around sunset, so that estimate could be off some. What I remember clearly is that whatever I was looking at seemed unusually tall. I remember thinking it had to be at least 7 feet tall, maybe more, but at this point I'm not even sure. I can't promise that it was really that tall because distance can play tricks on you, but it was definitely larger than an average person. The other thing that was strange to me was that it seemed to be wearing some sort of vegetation on its upper body. It looked almost like marsh grass draped over its shoulders and back. At the time I assumed there had to be a normal explanation. Maybe somebody was wearing hunting camo. Or hell, maybe it was a ghillie suit, I'm not even sure at this point. The possibility that it could be a random person in the marsh didn't bother me much, but what really disturbed me was how still it was. It was just standing there facing the creek. I remember lowering my binoculars and looking, well, again because I thought maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. The figure was still there. At that point I got on the radio and told my colleges that I thought I might have a hunter in the marsh about 250 yards from my location. They acknowledged the call and asked if I needed anything. I told them no, and I just kept watching the figure. The figure remained there for what I would think was around 30 seconds. It could have been a little longer, but I'm really not sure. The next thing I remember is that the figure moved. This is the part that I find hard to believe, even though I saw it with my own eyes. And to be truthful, if someone told me this story before this happened to me, I would probably have even scoffed too. The figure appeared to take a single step but somehow covered much more distance than it should have. 1 second it was standing beside a patch of marsh grass. The next time, it appeared noticeably farther away. In the moments, I thought that I just lost my point of reference in the fading light. I was wrong, though. It was still there, it just wasn't where it had been before. At that point I decided that I should move closer. Loose step, but that probably wasn't the smartest decision I've ever made. Anybody who has spent time in a South Carolina marsh at low tide knows exactly how difficult that mud can be. Every step sinks several inches, and every step takes effort. As I started moving, I kept checking the figure next to my binoculars whenever I could. The farther I went, the stranger the whole thing felt. Moments seemed affected by the terrain. It never appeared to be just inches away, it was struggling in the mud. It would simply be in one spot and then seem to be somewhere else. I know that sounds ridiculous. I'm there, telling you what I remember seeing. At some point I stopped walking and lowered the binoculars. This next part sounds strange now that I'm typing it out, but I remember noticing how quiet everything seemed. Perhaps it was not actually any quieter than usual, and I was simply hyper-focused on what I was observing. I honestly don't know. I just remember thinking about it at the time. A little while later I couldn't see much of anything clearly. I watched it for a few more seconds. Maybe longer. I'm not really sure. Then I looked down to check my footing. When I looked back up, it was gone. My first thought was that it had crouched down. Then I thought maybe it had moved behind one of the grass islands. Nothing I could think of really explained what happened. The area where I'd been watching it was wide open. I spent the next few hours searching that section of marsh. The tracking conditions were actually pretty good because of the low tide. I found deer tracks, raccoon tracks, coyote tracks, bird tracks, and signs of several other animals. What I never found was any indication that a person had been standing where I'd seen that figure. To this day, I am still unsure about what that figure actually was. I told one of the older colleagues I worked with that day about what I saw, and he advised me to leave it alone and not to worry about it, which I found strange. Strange encounter at the cornfield next to my house at 1 a.m. I live right next to the Croton National Forest in eastern North Carolina. This happened just 2 nights ago, around 1 a.m., when I was coming home from work. I've spent my whole life around woods, and I'm very familiar with deer behavior and appearance. I grew up studying patterns of deer, coyotes, hogs, and bears. I don't usually get shaken up by wildlife sightings. This one has been different. As I pulled into my driveway, I did what I normally do. My driveway curves in an L shape around the house, and my daughter's bedroom window faces the road, so I briefly turned my headlights off during the turn to avoid shining into her room. Once I cleared the angle, I turned them back on to park. When the headlights came back on, there was something standing at the edge of the cornfield that is right behind my house, where it meets the tree line, roughly 20 to 25 feet away. At first glance, I registered it as a deer. But the longer I actually looked at it, the more that assumption broke down. The best way I can describe the body is this: the torso and head didn't feel properly connected in a natural way. The head itself looked deer-like in shape, but the neck is what really stood out. It wasn't just long in a stretched posture sense. It looked structurally wrong, like the distance between the head and shoulders was exaggerated in a way that didn't match normal deer anatomy or stance. Even accounting for alert posture, head raised, neck extended, it looked too extended vertically, almost as if the head were sitting higher and farther forward than it should have been relative to the chest. The silhouette didn't taper the way a deer's normally does when it raises its head. Instead, it looked more like a long, thin column connecting a deer-like head to a body that I couldn't clearly resolve in the grass and shadow. The eyes reflected the headlights and appeared forward-facing in a way that gave them a very direct, predatory feeling rather than the usual side-angled deer look I'm used to. Again, I've spent my life seeing deer in headlights. The part that really made this stick with me is what happened when I turned my headlights fully on. It stood there, but I got a little closer, and only when I flicked my high beams to try to scare it did it finally react and move toward the woods. And this is where I'm struggling to explain it properly. I only clearly registered 2 legs in motion. I never saw a clean, full-body gait like a deer bounding. There was no clear 4-point movement pattern that I could track. It moved fast enough that the lower half became indistinct, and what I did see looked upright in motion rather than low to the ground. The neck of the creature remained extended as it moved. It reached the woods in seconds and disappeared. I know how this sounds. I'm not trying to force a label onto it or turn it into something it isn't. I just know it didn't match any deer behavior or appearance I've ever seen living here. I'm sharing this because I want to know if anyone else near the Croton Forest/Eastern NC area has seen anything similar around cornfield edges or treeline transitions at night. I'm open to explanations, but I also know what I experienced didn't match anything familiar. I could accept that it was a severely injured animal, but it doesn't seem likely based on what I saw. The Chupacabra. The story behind the Chupacabra phenomena is a fascinating tale that emerged in the late 20th century, specifically in Puerto Rico. The term Chupacabra translates to goat sucker in Spanish, and it refers to a creature that allegedly attacks and kills livestock, particularly goats, by draining their blood. The Chupacabra legend began in the early 1990s when reports of mysterious animal attacks started circulating in Puerto Rico. Farmers and residents discovered their livestock dead with puncture marks on their bodies and completely drained of blood. The media picked up on these accounts, and soon the story spread throughout the island and beyond. Descriptions of the Chupacabra varied, but a common depiction emerged as a creature roughly the size of a small bear or large dog with reptilian-like skin, spines or quills on its back, red glowing eyes, fangs, and a long tongue. Some witnesses claimed it could hop or fly short distances. As the reports gained attention, the Chupacabra phenomenon expanded beyond Puerto Rico. Similar sightings and livestock killings were reported in other Latin American countries, such as Mexico, Chile, and Argentina, as well as in parts of the United States, primarily in the southwestern states like Texas and New Mexico. The Chupacabra became a source of intrigue and fear, with some people even speculating that it was an extraterrestrial or a government experiment gone wrong. Various theories and urban legends were born, fueling the mystery surrounding the creature. In reality, the Chupacabra sightings can be attributed to a combination of factors. The original reports in Puerto Rico were likely influenced by the widespread belief in supernatural creatures and legends in the region. As the story spread, it is possible that some cases of animal attacks, possibly by feral dogs or other predators, were misinterpreted or embellished to fit the Chupacabra narrative. Furthermore, the Chupacabra gained more attention and notoriety due to media coverage, which led to an increase in reported sightings. In some cases, the creatures found and identified as Chupacabras turned out to be known animals with mange or other diseases that altered their appearance. While the Chupacabra phenomenon has persisted and become a part of popular culture, skepticism remains regarding its existence as a distinct creature. Many experts and scientists attribute the reported sightings to a combination of misidentification, folklore, and urban legends. In conclusion, the story behind the Chupacabra phenomena is a captivating mix of folklore, media attention, and sensationalism. It originated in Puerto Rico in the early 1990s, but its reach expanded to other countries, causing intrigue and fear among the public. While the legend of the Chupacabra continues to captivate people's imaginations, the evidence supporting its existence as a unique creature remains elusive. My encounter with a cryptid, the sunflower deer. I don't believe in the paranormal. I've never believed anything, like Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, or aliens or anything associated with things like that. All that changed last year, when I felt a terror I never thought possible. It was last April, 2025, and my contract with the Navy had literally just finished. I was officially a free man. When I moved back to Louisiana, my best friend asked to come look over his new land he just bought, and I agreed. He bought about 65 acres out of a 120-acre parcel. The plan was to divide our group and camp out for 2 days, exploring as much of the area as possible to ensure there were no concealed structures, homeless individuals camping out, deceased bodies, or similar concerns, you know? So we split up and made our way out. The first night, nothing happened at all. It was actually extremely boring, to be honest. I set up camp, made a fire, ate some food, canned beans, and went to sleep. When I woke up, there were some tracks just outside my camp that weren't there the night before, but I just kind of figured it was a coyote, a hog, or something. I'm very well known for being a deep sleeper. You have to be to sleep on an aircraft carrier. So I just brushed it off and went on with the day. The entire time I was surveying the land, I felt like someone was watching me. At first, I thought it was Jordan, my best friend and owner of the land, trying to make sure I was actually doing what I was supposed to be doing. But later in the evening I found a small creek and stopped to take a break and cool off in it. Every time I put my head underwater, I knew something was watching me, and it definitely wasn't Jordan. Again, I just tried to brush it off. I've dealt with anxiety/panic attacks for the last couple years due to something that happened in the Navy, so I just figured I was being paranoid again. When the sun was starting to go down, Jordan and I met back up to discuss everything we'd seen. He told me he found the foundation of some old shack, and I told him about the creek. I asked him if he had some weird feeling about being watched, and to my surprise, he said he did as well. It was never said out loud, but we both sort of just silently agreed that we were not going to sleep at the same time. I told Jordan that I'd stay up, and he seemed relieved at that. I don't think he slept at all the night before. I was sitting on a rock with a flashlight, a Henry 30-30 lever action, and an American Tactical .45 ACP. As I've mentioned before, I was in the military, but I wasn't part of the special forces. I worked as an IT technician focusing on radios and frequencies. Although I grew up as a redneck Cajun surrounded by guns my entire life, I was no expert, but I definitely knew what to do. The first hour went by, and nothing out of the ordinary happened. A twig snapped here, or a squirrel scurried across a branch, but that was it. That was until I heard a weird banging noise. It was like a lighter version of two bucks knocking their racks together. At first it started, then a minute later, then 30 seconds, and soon enough it was constant and getting louder and louder. I was starting to panic a bit, so I fired once in that direction, not trying to hit it but to scare whatever it was off and wake up Jordan, and both worked. Jordan was awake, and the noise stopped. He grabbed his gun and aimed it in the direction where I had shot. Then the noise started back again, but so much louder, it was legitimately deafening, and Jordan dropped his gun and fell to the ground, covering his ears. I was barely holding on, and only because of hearing loss, I kicked out a big light, and I saw it. I genuinely have no idea how to describe this thing, but I'll try my best to. It had a body like a deer, but all of its proportions were elongated and longer than they should have been. It was either whitish/brown skin or fur, I couldn't really tell. Now for the part that's terrified my dreams since that night, its face. It had normal buck antlers, but its head was extremely disproportionate to its body. It was extremely small and circular, with bulging eyes and a ring of black hair that went around its entire head, reminding me of a sunflower. It was by far the most terrifying thing I've ever seen/heard. I wish I could describe it better, but maybe one day I can get an artist to draw it better than I can describe it. I remember thinking I was going to die there, so I fired my rifle at the creature, hit it, and saw that it was obviously hurt, but the noises it made were terrifying. So I kept firing my rifle until it was empty, and when the creature started to run away, I switched to my pistol and continued shooting. After we heard its cry of pain pretty far away, Jordan and I left everything in the woods and ran to our trucks. By the time we got back, we were exhausted, terrified, and utterly shaken to our cores. We tried to explain how it looked to our friends and family, and my brother, Bo, called it the sunflower deer, which he made up on the spot. Has anyone ever heard of this before? It's been a year, and I don't go into the woods anymore. Mystery creature. So, it has taken me a while to have the courage to even write this because it seems bizarre, but here we go. When I was a little girl in the 80s, my favorite aunt and her fiancé came to stay with my grandmother and me for the night. I decided that I wanted to sleep next to my aunt that night, and so I crawled in bed next to her. I remember lying there just wired and unable to sleep, and then suddenly I saw this shape move out of the open closet area and in front of the window. This figure looked to be what I would describe as a male build and what I would describe as having glowing fissures all over that resembled a glow, either fire or what I would call lava today as an adult. In the dark, the non-glowing parts appeared dark or black like a shadow, and the figure looked solid, resembling a real person. I remember trying to be very still and quiet, but I don't recall having any fear whatsoever. It was startling at first, but I was not afraid for some reason. For reference, this was in the South, and at the time I had no real knowledge of entities other than the usual religious stuff, none of which bothered me at all. The figure did not make any strange gestures or do anything frightening. It literally just stepped in front of the window like it was standing there watching us. I still do not have any idea of what that could have been, and yes, I was definitely awake. 40 years later I remember it all vividly. Curious to know if I am the only one that has experienced something like this? Rocky Mountain Eyes. I'm a skeptic, but this has always been one of the more fun stories to tell and one that genuinely got my heart pounding, so I figured I'd toss it here for y'all to give your take on it. Around 10ish years ago, I don't remember exactly, my friends and I went on a group camp together in the lower Uintas, a sub-range of the Rocky Mountains. We drove to an unofficial campsite because not all of us could hike in, and it was meant to be a more relaxed camp. One of my friends was obsessed with Bigfoot and insisted we go Bigfoot hunting together. The back of my dad's truck was filled with gravel, don't remember for what, so 3 to 4 of us decided to hang out in the truck bed while the rest of the group, 10 to 12 total, went to sleep. A few hours into the night, some rocks started bouncing off the top of the truck. Though I'm pretty sure that was just one of my friends trying to scare everybody by sneakily tossing up gravel into the air so it hit the truck when it came back down. No damage, don't worry. But then the eyes showed up. We were scanning the area with a flashlight every now and then, and suddenly my friend freezes and goes, "Dude, I see eyes." And sure enough, there were eyes reflecting light back at us from the bushes around 30 to 40 feet from the campsite, past a field of tall grass. They just sat locked on us. Then my friend moved the flashlight away from the eyes and brought it back about 4 seconds later. The eyes were closer, this time looking at us from low in the grass, but still obscured enough that we couldn't see what they belonged to. My friend repeated the action of moving the flashlight away and then bringing it back a couple of times. Each time the eyes were closer than before, but we couldn't see what they belonged to. The closest they got was in the 20 to 30 feet range of us, but they always moved in a straight line toward us. At this point we were all reasonably freaked out. But my friend repeats the flashlight movement one last time, and suddenly the eyes go from being 20 to 30 feet away to 40 to 50 feet away back in the tree line, still looking straight at us. Then, without breaking eye contact, the eyes move straight vertically up to where they're now peering at us through the tree branches, almost like something went from a crouching to a standing position. I was still unable to see what the eyes belonged to, though. This was when I checked out and retreated to the tent with my dad. I somehow fell asleep. One of my friends who decided to sleep outside under a tarp reported hearing heavy footsteps and breathing in the camp later that night, with something rummaging around, but there were no visible paw prints or anything to clue into what it was. Additionally, there were no noises during the earlier eye encounter, except for those made by my friends and me. Now logically, my brain immediately goes to there was a bear. It explains the eyes moving up vertically, literally just it standing up and watching us, heavy footsteps, and heavy breathing, just checking our camp for a wee snack. This explanation doesn't account for the eyes slinking towards us low in the grass, as a bear would have been too large to hide in that position, and I believe it would have made more noise during the entire encounter. But it feels like either that or a mountain lion. Or maybe we got lucky and caught the attention of both. But I figured I'd put this here and hear y'all's thoughts. Skinwalker sighting in Poncho Villa State Park, New Mexico. Hi, about 2 years ago while I was driving back to CA from LA, I drove through SR9. It was around 3 a.m., and I was in the vehicle with my spouse and 1-year-old. It was extremely dark, and I likely observed a total of 4 to 5 vehicles traveling eastbound during that stretch of approximately 90 miles. I saw something on the side of the road that was hunched over, human-looking, tall, lean, had long limbs, had long fingers, and was dressed in a beige/dirty-looking cape. I kept quiet because I was always told to not give things power, so I pushed it out of my mind while we were driving about 90 miles per hour trying to get off this spooky road. Once we were in a town with streetlights and residential areas, my spouse said, "Phew, thank goodness we're finally in civilization." I could have sworn I saw someone standing on the side of the road. I replied, "Was it someone or something? I believe I also saw something." We spent the next few moments in silence processing the fact we might have seen the same thing. Slowly we ask our follow-up questions. So did it have this? Did it look like this? We saw the same thing and stayed quiet, hoping to escape unscathed. Want to know if anyone else has had a similar experience in the same place or nearby? That was my first experience with anything like this, and I swear I'm being 100% truthful, and I'm so glad my husband was there as a witness. We both talk about the event from time to time. This is my personal experience, and this is what actually happened. I was a biology major at Northwest Missouri State University in 1972, and I was collecting wild fruit flies for my genetics lab down by a nearby river. Well, an 8-foot-tall Bigfoot suddenly appeared from behind a nearby tree because he was interested in snacking on the watermelon and cantaloupe slices I was using to trap fruit flies in a mason jar. He had learned to just unscrew the lid and eat the fruit. Anyway, after a few startled moments, I finally got my act together and decided to just let him have the fruit and get the heck out of there. My car was parked about 300 yards away, and I made it back in great time, but the Bigfoot was right behind me, just making sure I didn't waste any more time than necessary. He watched me from about 10 feet away as I lumbered over the 4-foot barbed wire fence and ran up the embankment a short ways to my car. He remained in his forested area just watching me. So now I'm feeling a little safe sitting in my car with the engine running and pointed in the direction of town. So we just looked at one another for about 30 seconds, and I was amazed at the sheer size of this thing. The shoulders were at least 4 feet across, and the apparently necklace head came to a cone-shaped dome. The chest was as wide as the shoulders and went down to tree-sized legs more than a foot across. The arms were long and muscular, and I'm sure they could have torn me in half easily. It had longish dark brown hair all over and black eyes. I was a little surprised by the nice, even white teeth it had as it snarled at me. Finally, it decided that I had paused long enough, swiftly stepped over the barbed wire fence, and left only 30 feet of a small incline between us, prompting me to leave the area as if I were on a drag strip and head directly back to my professor's office to report a sighting of a new hominid species. Since he was the head of the Department of Biology, I thought he would be absolutely ecstatic about being in on such a groundbreaking discovery. Well, the first thing he said as I walked into his office empty-handed was, "Where is the jar with the fruit flies?" So I knew right away this was going to be difficult. Anyway, I plunged right into it with my sighting report. He just laughed and said there are no new species of hominids here in the northwest corner of Missouri in 1972. I was totally dejected at this point. I thought he had an open mind and was open to unique observations. I persisted in making my case, and eventually, I persuaded him to return with me to retrieve the jar containing the wild fruit flies, as we needed them for a lab class the following day to study their DNA. A couple of hours had passed since my last visit, so I figured the jar might be gone by then, but I hoped it would be safe to check. However, a part of me hoped that the jar was still there and that my PhD chairman from the Department of Biology would actually get to see what I had observed just a couple of hours earlier. I parked my car in the same spot as before and had it turned back towards town to make a fast getaway if needed. The doctor noticed my explanation, and I simply replied that it was to save time. The woods were as quiet as before except for a lone tree frog that was croaking. The doctor was ecstatic that we had found a tree frog where he thought there were none for a long time. We triangulated it and finally found it on the side of a tree nearby. He was practically jumping up and down for joy when we found it. Then he admitted that he was glad he came along with me. So we looked around and found my mason jar on the ground, but the lid was off and there was no fruit in it. He was disappointed that there were no fruit flies to study. About that time the same Bigfoot stepped out from behind the same tree and made himself known to us. So I yelled at my professor, "See? There it is." He looked at the creature closely, as it was probably only 15 feet away, and finally decided that it was one of my friends in a furry suit. I was flabbergasted. Then the Bigfoot picked up a 1-foot diameter round river rock and tossed it at my professor and made a roaring noise. In total amazement, I watched my professor walk towards this animal, telling it to take off the furry suit and show himself. Then the Bigfoot picked up a nearby 4-inch diameter broken tree limb and smashed it into smithereens against the tree next to him, and there was an instant change in my professor's attitude, and he said, "Let's get out of here." So that's what we did, and the Bigfoot followed us all the way back to the fence as he had done before. We crossed the fence at lightning speed and made it to my car, and I started the engine. And the Bigfoot stayed on the other side of the fence as before. The next thing that happened was a surreal discussion between me and my professor about the existence of these animals. I was yelling, "See? There's a real live Bigfoot." And he was still half thinking it was my friend in a furry suit. Meanwhile, the Bigfoot was roaring and growling on the other side of the fence. As my professor looked back at it, it stepped over the fence and started up the slight incline towards my car. This time it didn't look like it was going to stop, so I floored the accelerator and took off as fast as possible. Well, the Bigfoot was close behind and actually got a hold of the back end of my car and shoved it to the side once. I was accelerating at about 30 miles per hour, and it was keeping up with us, and all the while I was yelling this was not my friend in a furry suit at my professor. We reached a speed of 45 miles per hour, but the Bigfoot was still right behind my car and gaining on us. At about 60 the Bigfoot slacked off and started to slow down. I was kind of worried that it would actually follow us all the way back into town since it wasn't that far. So my professor was beside himself as to what to believe even after witnessing that big animal chasing us down the road at 60 miles per hour. All of this happened in 1972, and as anyone can see, things have not changed much in the last 52 years. I graduated in 1973 with my BS in biology and have since then seen many more Bigfoot in Missouri, Iowa, California, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, and New Mexico. It has always sparked my interest in cryptozoology to this day. I've never really told anyone this. At least not after we got back to my house and my brother asked why we looked so scared. So one night, this girl I had met in this backwoods Oregon town called Lapine. This was 2013, times were different. Not everyone had smartphones yet. A lot did but not all. Well, we were walking down this dirt road, and it was pitch black, mind you. We would walk down this road every weekend to smoke bowls. The darkness didn't faze us, beers in hand, we stumble down the road. Then all of a sudden I hear what I can only describe as a chuckle. The woman stops, I stop, and she clutches me close. I know she heard it too. It came from a line of trees on the far side of the dark dirt road. We don't have lights on our phones like we have today. Back then, with a flip phone, you had to flip it open. Then go to the flashlight. She gets her phone out and opens it. The second it opens, the chuckle erupts. Front, behind, left, right. I think we are going to die. Hand of God. The next noise that echoes is a shriek. Almost like a woman being ended. Now this could have been a thing involving animals. Sure, I'll accept that. But what I heard was real. After that last shriek it went quiet. We stood there for a second, with her still trying to turn on her flashlight, which was glowing on her face as she stumbled through the menace. We walked back to the dirt road neighborhood. Both are sort of silent. My take on all of it is, would you be able to keep living a normal life if you actually experienced something? I think I'm being hunted. Hi. I've been to this abandoned military base a few times. It's right by Charlestown State Park, Indiana. I didn't know the history of the area before, but I researched it today, and let's just say I wish I had never gone. You guys may not believe in this stuff, but I urge you to research the land wherever you go urban exploring before you visit it. Last night I went here with my partner and two of my roommates. Let's call them Jack and Daniel. We were walking along the road, hearing noises the whole night, but didn't think much of it since it's usual for the area. There's not much around the base aside from the Ohio River, a few factories, and a residential neighborhood further away. But we wrote most of the sounds we heard off as animals or even maybe homeless people sleeping there. Since that could be a possibility. We saw several animals crossing the path in front of us the whole time. There were 3 coyotes that crossed our path when we got there, and later I saw something like a squirrel or a rabbit run across that almost seemed to grow larger as it got towards the edge of the trees. But my vision isn't very good, and I don't have glasses, so I wrote it off since I was the only one that saw it. There's a small cemetery there from the 1700s off to the left that we stopped at for a bit, and that's where we heard the first whistle. Sharp, and from our right, where an abandoned house stood between us and the way we had been going. I smoked a bit of marijuana with Jack by the cemetery, and afterwards we decided to check the house. The floor had caved in, though, so of course nobody was in there. We've been here before, and we were armed. So we ignored it. Figuring it was probably someone trying to mess with us. And even though I believe in this stuff, I thought the same. We got down to the part of the road where there's a large gravel mound next to the woods in an open part of the trail where it split off into 2 and the road ended. We had all had a long day and were ready to go home now, since we weren't really planning on exploring last night, just wanting to walk around. Before, we had walked through this part several times and even further with no problem. But as soon as we started heading back, howls filled the woods and we all froze. At first, it sounded like a group of coyotes behind us. Then, the sound started on either side of us at the same time. The howls devolved into yipping, then almost laughing and snarling. And it got so loud that my partner and I couldn't even hear each other standing besides one another. The voices of the coyotes seemed to split into several others, even sounding like other animals, morphing together into something much darker and seemingly vibrating the air itself. We've all heard coyotes before, even 2 of us have been in similar situations before. But that was not coyotes. I've even heard coyotes in a frenzy feasting before, that was not it. Guns were drawn, and we started walking much slower, closer together as a group. The sounds quieted down as we prepared to defend our lives, but we could hear growling following us back towards our vehicle. Whatever it was, probably multiple of them. Kept on either side of us, just out of view, following us. And they had been stalking us the whole time we were there. Probably an hour. Everything was silent, to the point we couldn't even hear a fly buzzing around or the chirp of a cricket, only what was hunting us. Until we heard an owl from up ahead, a single hoot. Except it didn't seem high up in the trees, almost ground level. Like it had been watching us. Followed by another noise from the owl, but much deeper, almost guttural and breathy. As if whatever it was calling off the hunt. Or warning the others that we weren't going to be easy prey. And the growling stopped. The rest of the walk back was tense and quiet. Filled with heavy breathing and whispered jokes to cope with the uncanny fear we were all feeling. That's when I thought I saw something on the way back, but I wrote it off anyway as a log or a bush until I got home. A pale humanoid figure. But all wrong. Its body seemed too large for its thin, long limbs. And it seemed to be making itself seem smaller, curled in on itself against the ground just besides the road, partially hidden. Its head seemed to be tucked between its hunched shoulders, looking up at me with its jaw hung open, as if broken or unhinged like a snake. I kept walking though, even as my head turned to keep my eyes trained on it as we passed by the thing. It could have been nothing, and I truly could have been misinterpreting what I saw. But I saw Jack glance at it, and I could almost see the gears turning in his head even as he wrote it off too. We made it back to the van safely, and the drive home was unnerving. A deer seemed to come from nowhere, running out in front of us without even glancing up at the headlights. We came to a halt, only for the thing to slowly crawl up the embankment besides the road, its skin looking too tight on its bones and moving like a cat as it disappeared into the woods. Instantly, I knew that was not a deer. And we sped off. Shortly after, an opossum crossed the road in front of us, and our windscreen immediately fogged up completely. To the point, Daniel, who was driving, couldn't even see the road in front of us. The weather was normal, and there wasn't any humidity outside to explain it. We drove for almost 10 minutes like that, and I assume we were barely in our lane. Then we got further out, closer to where we live, and another opossum crossed the road. The fog disappeared. Shortly after that, we pulled into the driveway and sat for a moment, talking and trying to figure out what to do. After a few minutes, we decided to call our Native American neighbor over to tell him what happened. He stood in the driveway while his dog barked across the street. I already knew what this thing was and that it had followed us. But my partner and our roommates never believed in it, until now. And since now was the perfect time while I wasn't alone, I went inside and got my own dog to take on a short walk around the yard. Nothing weird happened, not until my partner and I went to check the mail. We walked just a bit down the road, less than 50 feet away, and we could still see everyone standing there talking in the driveway. My partner grabbed the mail, and we both heard a noise from the distance. Something between a yowl and a growl, like a mountain lion or bobcat. Which was normal for the area. Except for the way everything went silent again. Our neighbor's dog stopped barking, and everyone looked at each other as we walked back up to the house. That's when we decided it wasn't safe outside anymore and went in. This was last night, and we all immediately went to bed. Way too mentally exhausted to even stay up in case something else happened. Now it's midday, and I haven't been outside again yet. Though I've heard a few things hitting my roof, which, to be fair, could be anything. Usually I don't dream, but I didn't sleep well last night. I kept seeing myself, looking wide-eyed and crazed, reaching into my own mouth. My hands felt around for loose teeth before ripping them out one by one with bleeding gums. I was looking at something, almost hypnotized while I was doing it. As if ridding myself of my most precious defense. The whole experience has been terrifying. Truly. I don't know if I actually saw the thing or if my mind had been playing tricks on me. And I don't know if my dream has anything to do with it or if my subconscious is trying to duck with me. But I know this thing is watching us, probably waiting. If anyone has any advice on what I should do or how to keep this thing away from myself and the people I care about, that would be much appreciated.